After leaving us with the final shot of Xavier going to go search for his wife on the surface world for the first time in 3 years, and after exposing the false reality and lies created by Sinatra for the community of the bunker, one would imagine that this premiere episode would pick things up where we ended, but no, this episode had other plans. Now, while I didn't cover season 1 last year, I recently shared some quick videos in the last few days over my thoughts of season 1 of each episode, and you can find those thoughts on my creative playlist of Paradise Breakdowns, but I am here today beyond excited to be along the journey with you all this time around in real time for season 2. In this breakdown, we'll only be focusing on episode 1 because at the time of this recording, I've only seen the first episode and I'll be watching episode 2 and 3 right after. In this breakdown, we'll be diving deep into the introduction of our newest character, Annie Clay, and the emotional backstory that's already setting the stage for what promises to be another compelling season of Paradise. With all that said, let's discuss this episode, full spoilers ahead. We open with a flashback to the famous Graceland in Memphis, Tennessee. It's here amongst the Elvis enthusiasts that we meet Annie Clay. Immediately, you can see that Annie is very meticulous. She's not just passively listening to the tour guide, but she's actually taking notes, soaking in every detail of Elvis's iconic home. Now, it's clear that this isn't her first rodeo. She knows the tour inside out, even detecting when the tour guide switches up his jokes. Her devotion to Elvis and going on this tour shows us as an audience that she is someone who enjoys a routine, but also potentially takes things very seriously. But the heart of Annie's world, at least initially, revolves around her home life. We quickly learn that she's the primary caretaker of her sickly mother by the name of Mary Beth Clay. As we get a quick look around the house, we see the critical care documents revealing Mary Beth's current situation, but we also see that she got her degree as a doctor in medicine at Duke University. It's later said that Mary Beth had the potential of a brilliant career, but it was unfortunately cut short, potentially by the very mental health struggles that will define her later. But yet, a shared spark of joy remains. We see Mary Beth eagerly awaits Annie's Graceland updates, finding particular amusement in the new joke. We see Annie handing over her mother's Pringles to eat with her medicine, and I do wonder if this shared love for Elvis was forced upon Annie at a young age, or if she genuinely fell in love with Elvis as her mother did. If so, this connection seems to come from a place of a happier past for both of them, especially for Mary Beth. Now, the quiet rhythm of their lives is shattered when Annie briefly steps out. Upon her return, she's met with a devastating discovery, and that is her mother being found dead. Now, at her funeral, we get a little bit more insight on her mother. Now, as I said earlier, it's revealed that Mary Beth's promising medical career was cut short by her battle with mental health, causing her to retreat from the world. Now, while the exact cause of her death isn't explicitly stated, the later shot of the scattered pills on Mary Beth's table combined with the mention of her struggles strongly suggests of a tragic suicide. Annie's grief here feels eternal, quiet, and deeply personal as we see she's taken up a habit of picking at her nails as her mother did. To me, this opening scene did a really excellent job of establishing Annie as a person of quiet observation, immersed care, and now profound loss. To me, watching her meticulous nature that we saw at Graceland hints at her having a key eye for detail, which could be an invaluable skill as the season's mysteries unfold. Now, I do want to point out that Elvis' connection to an already established character. We know from season 1 that Xavier's wife, Terry, is a huge Elvis fan and even named their first child after his last name, Presley. I do wonder if this shared passion for Elvis will be an unexpected common ground if and when Annie and Terry eventually cross paths. Fast forward to where we find Annie Clay is now all grown up as she is a third-year medical student, most likely following the footsteps of her late mother. But underneath the white coat, we're about to see that the trauma of her childhood remains. While tending to a patient, Annie notices a simple bruise on the patient's leg, and she's transported back to her childhood caring for her mother. The weight of her past is too much for Annie as we find out that she drops out of medical school, and with nowhere to go, she heads to the one place that she and Elvis always felt safe, and that's Graceland. Annie is now parked outside the gates, feeling lost, and it's here that she's approached by Gail Edwards, a security guard with a very kind heart. After hearing Annie's story, jobless, familyless, and broken, Gail offers her a lifeline, and that's given her a job opportunity as a new tour guide. This obviously being a perfect fit for Annie. Annie knows Graceland better than anyone, and before long, she's thriving at this new job, and she's even using the same corny jokes that she heard as a kid to delight the tourists. We see that Annie and Gail become close friends, and they even spend the nights exploring the restricted areas of the mansion. For the first time in years, it seems like Annie has found her home. But unfortunately, her world is about to change for the worse. While Annie is mid-tour, the world begins to collapse. We see the catastrophic extinction event from season 1, but this time around it's through Annie's eyes. While everyone else panics, we see Annie's medical training and sharp instincts kick in. She immediately directs Gail to grab every valuable supply and as much food as they can find. In a rush to safety, Gail falls down the stairs and badly injures her leg. As we fast forward to day 3 and we see that they're hunkered down, but things are starting to look grim. Despite Annie's medical background, she can see that Gail's leg is becoming infected. Now they eventually make their way outside, and it's here that we get more ties to season 1, where we know that Cal launched the Blue Codes, which were the global EMP that took out the oncoming nukes, but also destroyed all the electronics. Now over the next 41 days, Annie tries to keep Gail's spirits up with stories and laughter, but the infection is winning. To make matters worse, despite it being summer, a never-ending winter has arrived. On day 45, Gail looks at Annie and tells her that she isn't cold anymore. And Annie knows what that means. In her final moments, Gail tells Annie that her mother would have been proud of her. It's a devastating mirror of Annie's past, first her mother, and now the woman who treated her like a daughter. On day 46, Annie is alone once again. In a heartbreaking scene, we watch as she buries Gail in the snow next to Elvis. Annie's a survivor, but we can see that she's breaking down in tears after losing Gail. It is day 689, almost 2 years of endless nights and cold. For Annie Clay, held up in the iconic Graceland, it's a marathon of isolation and fears from the outsiders finding her sanctuary. But on this particular morning, something's about to shift. We see a ray of sunshine finds its way inside, a way to let her know that the weather has finally broken. Annie has a newfound hope, and this is a feeling that she hasn't felt since before Gail's death. As we watch Annie journal, she hears some sounds coming from the outside. She looks outside to find the strangers outside of the gates, and after so long alone and not having had any contact with the outside world, she's immediately feeling the fears of danger. Not knowing if they plan to raid the place or to attack her, we see Annie sprints upstairs and hides. Now the doors get kicked in and she sees a group of armed men, and immediately they can tell that someone's living here, and eventually we see Annie gets caught. The lead stranger, a man named Link, tries to calm her down. We see Link offers Annie a jacket as he tries to make small talk with her, but Annie is weary, giving only simple answers. We see Link tries to lighten the mood by breaking the tension and playing the piano, but Annie's still not sure who these men are and fearful of what they're capable of. We watch as she takes this chance to hit him over the head, and she locks herself in another bedroom. 3 days have passed since they've arrived, and Annie remains in the room. Now the delicious smells of what the men are cooking downstairs becomes a hard pass for Annie as she eventually joins them. You know, I bet Annie and the others would have loved if they had meals from today's support. Let's take a moment to hear from Factor.
Look, I'm going to be honest with you all. I am not a fan of going grocery shopping. It is so time consuming. I have to shop at so many different stores because one store doesn't have the one thing I need. It is just one giant headache for me. So that's where Factor comes in. Whether it's cold days or you have big goals and you have no time to cook, Factor makes healthy eating easy with fully prepared meals designed by dietitians and crafted by chefs. So eat well without planning or cooking. Look, for me, it's all about convenience and it's all about having options, and that's why I believe Factor is such a perfect fit for my lifestyle. Quality, functional ingredients including lean proteins, colorful veggies, whole food ingredients, and healthy fats. No refined sugars, no artificial sweeteners, no refined seed oils. Meals that fit your goals and schedule, healthier eating, calorie management, more protein. The variety is so great because you have 100 rotating weekly meals to keep things fresh and delicious throughout the winter. Options include high protein, calorie smart, Mediterranean diet, GLP-1 support, and ready-to-eat salads. Plus, the new Muscle Pro collection supports strength and recovery. And I mean the convenience alone. It's always fresh, never frozen, ready in about 2 minutes, no prep, no stress. Right now for me, I'm trying to get back on my healthy kick, so having the available proteins and having the vegetables and whole foods ingredients is just a perfect fit for me. So head over to factormeals.com/moviefiles50off and use my special code MovieFiles50off to get 50% off and a free breakfast for 1 year. Again, that's factormeals.com/moviefiles50off. And again, use my code MovieFiles50off to get 50% off and free breakfast for an entire year. Eat like a pro this month with Factor. Now, this is for new subscribers only and varies by plan, and one free breakfast item per box for 1 year while subscription is active. Link introduces Annie to the others and assures her that they are not the bad guys. He goes on to explain that after 3 years, the world is slowly kind of going back to normal. Link goes over his experiences over the last 3 years and being saved by a man named Geiger. They made it their mission to shut down all the remaining 94 nuclear power plants across the country to prevent any more disasters. Now, another member by the name of Urkel explains the catastrophe of the volcanic eruptions that cause coastal floods. He also explains his theories about the EMP, which we know from Season 1, Episode 7, which wiped out all the electronics. They estimate that 2/3 of the US population is gone, but the survivors are now grouping and growing food and rebuilding. Link and the others will be Annie's new roommates for the next few days, and as of now, they seem to be pretty normal. We see Geiger and Link discuss their next plans, which is to go to the underground bunker, as they plan to attack, but they also are looking for a woman inside, which we'll discuss a little bit later.
I think we should stage here, set up a perimeter. This place is going to be seriously fortified. Do we have the firepower? Yes. Even if we get in, how are we going to find her?
We can see that Link not only has an injured hand that Annie notices, but he seems to have some bad headaches as well. Annie sees that Link and the others take potassium iodine. Now, this is used to treat overactive thyroid and protect the thyroid gland from the effects of radiation from inhaled or swallowed radioactive iodine, which makes me think that it's possible that Link and others are maybe sick. We see that Annie is warming up to Link and her new roommates. As we know that she was once a med student, she notices Link's fractured hand that's been bothering him. She offers to fix it, which she does, as it's here that we can see a genuine connection beginning between the two. Now, Link and Annie continue to get to know each other that night as he shares with her that he believes she's around 25 years old, as he also talks about some childhood memories that he had with his sister, and he also comes from California. He shows her a picture of his freshman ID and that he went to California Institute of Technology, which is known for science and engineering. Now, knowing this about Link, I wonder if his time at Caltech should be something that we should remember for future episodes. Also, him mentioning that he has a sister, my mind immediately goes to what if him and Jane are related? Now, Link tells Annie that they're going to be leaving soon and that he's a part of a larger group that's headed west through St. Louis to reset the world. Now, speaking to this larger group, I do wonder if they are as welcoming as Link and the others, and I also wonder if Terry is a part of that group as well. Now, since it's their last night together, we see Link has shaved to try to impress Annie, and we see this rare moment of joy and laughter and a shared stories. Annie's feeling comfortable and confesses she misses giving tours before the world ended. Link takes this opportunity and suggests that she gives them one last tour. As they go on the tour, you can get the sense of the energy shifting in the room. Now, I blame this on me watching way too many dark post-apocalyptic shows and movies because I was just certain that Link and the others were about to show Annie their true colors by attacking her and maybe trying to kill her, but as we will see, thankfully I was wrong. Now, the tour comes to an end and we see Link and Annie are now alone. Annie shares her favorite Elvis song that played at the start of this episode, which is Are You Lonesome Tonight? As Link makes a move on Annie and she gets emotional and she begins to cry as Link comforts her. It's been a while since Annie's been intimate with someone, and it might even be possible that this is her first time being intimate with someone else as they take their time getting to know each other and they make their way to the bed. Now, during this scene, we see all the scars on Link's body, and it makes me think, were these scars due to him just surviving in the outside world over these past 3 years, or is it possible that these are scars from him fighting or maybe killing others? It is now the next morning as we see Link shares their next moves with Annie, and that's a road trip to Colorado.
There's a bunker out there. We're convinced of it. But not just any bunker, full underground city. I mean, this place has supplies that don't exist anywhere else. Airplanes, electrical grids, energy sources that can help jumpstart the world. But it's more than that. There's something there, something that nobody knows about. Something so dangerous.
Now, that last part they kind of laugh off, but Link wants Annie to join them to reset the world. It's time to leave, but after 3 years of solitude in Graceland, this has become Annie's safe haven and she's terrified of leaving. Annie locks herself in the room, and we see Link refuses to go without her. Link tries to get her to leave with him, but Geiger arrives and tells Link that it's time for them to go now. He reminds him of how important this mission is to get to the bunker in order to kill Alex. It's here we see Link experiencing another one of those extreme headaches, and we see his nose bleeding. Again, could this be a side effect of exploring the world for the past 3 years, or is it a side effect of taking those pills, or a combination of both? Now, despite his desperate plea, Link and the others eventually leave. Annie, still locked inside, made her choice to stay behind. As Annie leaves the room, she sees that Link left her some supplies and a map that says that he promises to find her and come back for her. We see some months go by as Annie is now by herself again, but that is about to change. As we can see that after some time has passed, Annie is pregnant with Link's baby. Outside, Annie hears an aircraft and sees that it crash landed a few miles away from her. Now, curious and worried that maybe Link has returned, Annie decides to leave Graceland to help for the first time in over 3 years. As she approaches the crash, she finds a familiar face to us, and it's Xavier, who's passed out after the crash.
Listen to me.
No, you listen to me. You're not going to Atlanta. You're taking us to Colorado.
This episode really put a focus on the past, present, and future in a very interesting way. From seeing the beginnings of the relationship between X and Terry set in the past, to meeting a group of kids who have been surviving on their own and to me represent the future of this new world after the event. Now, speaking of the future, what's the meaning behind the visions that X experiences 3 times in this episode where he not only sees Terry from the past but also sees Link? We are back breaking down this second episode of Season 2 of Paradise. Now, on first view, you might not think much from this episode, but there are actually a ton of little details that speak within the larger picture of where the story might go. With all that being said, let's discuss this episode, full spoilers ahead. We pick up with Xavier dreaming of Terry, who's telling him to come to her, which hints at a monumental turning point of their relationship of how it all began. But reality crashes harder than Xavier's plane because he wakes up to find himself literally stuck in a tree after a brutal crash. Now, before we fully get an idea of the aftermath, we flash back to X in a plane desperately trying to communicate with anyone over the radio. Now, all of a sudden, X starts experiencing the exact same symptoms that we saw Link having in the previous episode. Now, as I said in my previous breakdown of episode 1, maybe there are some side effects to being exposed to certain areas, in this case that being Arkansas and Memphis, maybe where the air and the atmosphere causes these tense headaches and nosebleeds. But if that is the case, my next question would be, why have only X and Link been experiencing this? But then this is where things get interesting. Xavier experiences what I'm calling a vision from the future. I say that based on the fact that we see that his hair is longer and also he has a beard, which we haven't seen this look from him from the entire show because he's mostly been clean shaved. And one would think that his beard grew during his journey on the surface. Now in this vision, he's following a man who's later to be revealed to be Link, who's sporting that shaved beard we saw him get for Annie at the end of episode 1. Again, to me, clearly this places both of them in the future. We see this vision 2 more times later in this episode, and it looks like they may be somewhere underground or maybe even in the bunker by the looks of it. Now, Paradise has always been grounded in reality, but if this is X experiencing a future event, are we about to dive into some sci-fi? Did exposure to whatever X and Link have been around give them future sight? I know it's a stretch, but my next question would be, did Link experience the same vision of X when he experienced his symptoms? The way it was cut, it made it feel like X was experiencing this, not just us as an audience maybe seeing some foreshadowing. I don't know, what do you guys think? Is this a future sci-fi vision or something else entirely? Now, I'll have more thoughts about this that we'll discuss a little bit later. Now, back in the present day, feeling like he might not make it during this hailstorm, X makes a desperate mayday call in hopes to find Terry. Now, he tells her that the kids are safe in the bunker and even gives her coordinates to the location of the bunker, which might not have been a good idea to share over the radio, but we see X thinking that this might be his last I love you to his family before making the actual impact. Now we see X trying to leave the plane, but he's in pain after hurting his knee. As he slowly pulls himself through the plane, he falls and re-injures it. This immediately cuts to a flashback in 2004 at a Secret Service training center where we see X injuring that exact same knee for the very first time. The doctor is preparing to snap it back into place with sedation. Flash forward to present day, and X is about to perform this same agonizing procedure on himself without any sedation, completely feeling every ounce of pain. Now, as he's about to start, a little boy who reveals his name later in the episode as Daniel appears and covers X's mouth to be quiet. This kid goes through X's bag, most likely looking for food and resources, but he notices a picture of X's kids. Now, as Daniel is doing this, we can see X takes the map of how to find Terry and he hides it in his pocket. Keep that in mind for a little bit later. Now, Daniel continues to tell X to be quiet as off in the distance, there are two men slowly approaching them. Daniel, having spent more time in the outside world, he takes X's belongings to hide, and he offers X a hand and a stick as they gather together to hide behind a rock. Unfortunately, the unknown men take supplies, including weapons, from the plane, and they run off after the hailstorm returns. Now we watch as Daniel takes X to his boat that serves as one of his homes, where inside X finds Daniel's little sister and his friends. Now the rest of this episode cuts back and forth between present day X and 2004 X, so since the next scene is in the past, let's break down all the details for a bit and tie it back to the present after. Now in 2004, we find X after his knee surgery and he's in good spirits, but he's about to be in better spirits because this whole flashback is where X meets his wife Terry for the first time, as she was his roomie in the hospital and she was awaiting surgery as well. Now, this might not be anything, but Terry gives X her green Jell-O after overhearing him complain about his favorite preferred flavors. Let's pause for a quick prediction for possibly a very beautiful moment between these two characters. I would love for this to happen when they are reunited at some point this season, where we'll find X who's close to finding his wife, but he hasn't found her quite yet, but then all of a sudden, a green Jell-O container hits X and it's Terry. Or to elaborate on this idea, we can maybe find a situation where he finds empty green-yellow containers of Jell-O while he's looking for his wife, and he knows he's getting closer to her because she's leaving these behind like breadcrumbs in order for him to find her. Obviously, he'll know that that's a reference to when they first met. Now, back in the flashback, we see that X is possibly in good enough shape to maybe go home and leave from the hospital that day, but after meeting Terry for the first time, he decides to stay behind, and he tells the nurse that his knee is really hurting and he wants to stay longer. Now we watch as X continues his pursuit with Terry, but she's got other things in mind besides flirting with her roomie. Now Terry shares that she's studying to get her doctorate in cell molecular and organismal biology. This being the first time that we actually got a better understanding of what Terry actually does as a scientist. Now I just mentioned a future episode prediction, and here's another one. While studying, it's mentioned that one of her cards had Acmanita phthalides, which is also known as the death cap. It's a deadly poisonous mushroom. Now, my prediction being, could we see this mushroom come into play at some point this season where Terry or maybe X uses this poison to kill another character? Now, going back to her expertise as a scientist, I find it interesting knowing that Terry specializes in the study of cells and DNA and biology that has to do with evolution. I say all that to say that since the show started, I always wondered what Terry did as a scientist and why was it so important for her to go back and forth to Atlanta. Now, for those who don't know, the CDC, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, is actually located in Atlanta. I don't have my theory fully thought out quite yet, but I just have a feeling that Terry will be a much larger character in Resetting the World, and maybe she has possible ties to Sinatra, but also possibly Link, saying that there's something very dangerous in the bunker from episode 1. I really think that we'll be learning that Terry may have some secrets, maybe some dark, mysterious secrets from her past that will be uncovered this season. Now, X is putting on his charm and takes interest in her work and offers kind gestures like covering her feet with a blanket. He is slowly gaining her interest and it's really working on her. But Terry is very upfront about how this relationship could go. As we know, she is career driven and lets X know that marriage and kids aren't in the foreseeable future for her, but we know that X is persistent and spoilers, they do get married and they have kids. With that last point, I do wonder if we'll see more of Terry and X in the past as they fall in love as future flashbacks for the rest of the season. From seeing how they dated and eventually her listening to her heart over her career by breaking her rule by marrying X and having kids, again, I think this is something we'll probably see as the season goes along. Now, the turning point comes when Terry has a complication during her surgery and temporarily loses her sight. She's terrified, but X is right there, comforting her and promising that her sight will return. He even stays overnight after being discharged just to make sure that she isn't alone. And all of this is where her armor cracks and she starts to let X in. I gotta say, with these flashbacks, watching them fall in love in the past while X desperately searches for her in the present makes those scenes hit even harder. Again, we know that eventually she's gonna break her no marriage and no kid rule, but seeing the foundation of that trust built on green jello and conversations in the hospital was really the heart of this episode. Now, we'll come back to this at the end and tie it together with what's going on with X in the present. Now, before moving on to the rest of this breakdown, let's take a moment to hear from today's support, and that's Factor.
Look, I'm going to be honest with you all. I am not a fan of going grocery shopping. It is so time consuming. I have to shop at so many different stores because one store doesn't have the one thing I need. It is just one giant headache for me. So that's where Factor comes in. Whether it's cold days or you have big goals and you have no time to cook, Factor makes healthy eating easy with fully prepared meals designed by dietitians and crafted by chefs. So eat well without planning or cooking. Look, for me, it's all about convenience and it's all about having options, and that's why I believe Factor is such a perfect fit for my lifestyle. Quality, functional ingredients including lean proteins, colorful veggies, whole food ingredients, and healthy fats. No refined sugars, no artificial sweeteners, no refined seed oils. Meals that fit your goals and schedule, healthier eating, calorie management, more protein. The variety is so great because you have 100 rotating weekly meals to keep things fresh and delicious throughout the winter. Options include high protein, calorie smart, Mediterranean diet, GLP-1 support, and ready-to-eat salads. Plus, the new Muscle Pro collection supports strength and recovery. And I mean, the convenience alone. It's always fresh, never frozen, ready in about 2 minutes, no prep, no stress. Right now for me, I'm trying to get back on my healthy kick, so having the available proteins and having the vegetables and whole foods ingredients is just a perfect fit for me. So head over to factormeals.com/moviefiles50 off and use my special code MovieFiles50 off to get 50% off and a free breakfast for 1 year. Again, that's factormeals.com/moviefiles50 off. And again, use my code MovieFiles50 off to get 50% off and free breakfast for an entire year. Eat like a pro this month with Factor. Now, this is for new subscribers only and varies by plan, and one free breakfast item per box for 1 year while subscription is active. Meanwhile, back with X and the surviving kids on the boat, most likely not having the best options of food available, we watch as the kids go through X's things and they eat his food. Now, at this point, none of these kids have verbally spoken a word, but they seem to have their own way of communicating in silence in order to keep a low profile from any outside threats through using hand gestures and eye contact. X still needs to take care of his knee and remembers how it was done back when he originally injured it, as we see Daniel smartly has X wait till the loud noise and the thunder hits, that way he's not hurt by the outsiders, as he pops it back into place and we watch as X passes out. Again, it's here that we flash back to the past with Terry and him, but also being followed by Link, which is the second time that we see this in this episode. Now, I want to know, when X and Link are experiencing this symptom, it is the same visual effect of like almost a glass or mirror shattering when they have these issues. And again, this was seen in episode 1, but it was also seen a few times back in season 1 as well. If I'm not mistaken, I remember seeing this effect whenever one of our characters, for example, Samantha, would think about or recall events from the past, so I don't think that that is a coincidence. To me, it's heavily implying a shared connection or perhaps a common symptom tied to these memories or experiences. Again, if my memory serves me right, I think we saw X have this experience in season 1. We also saw James Marsden character as a president have this. We also saw Samantha have this. And of course, in this season so far, we saw Link experience the same thing. Now, X shares his name with the kids very slowly and very loudly, not knowing if the kids can understand him, but it's here that Daniel speaks for the first time. He introduces X to his little sister and his friends, who don't talk much. It's during this exchange that X learns that he's in Arkansas. He talks about his own kids, and Daniel opens up about his heartbreaking journey as well. They were a part of a travel team that lost their entire families during the event, and they have been fending for themselves ever since.
It's truly gut-wrenching seeing the toll that the world has taken on these kids. One of them even consistently opens and closes their eyes, trying to imprint their parents' faces so they don't forget. Man, these kids have seen things that no kids should ever see at this point in their lives. But they have adapted to the horrors of the new world over the past 3 years. One of them casually asks X if they can have his jacket after he dies. This being a brutal reminder that for them, it's pure survival. Anyone outside their small group is essentially a temporary resource or more likely already dead. Now we watch as X invites Daniel and the others to the bunker back with him once he finds his wife, but Daniel tells him that they actually like it where they are. Now it's important to keep this in mind because X tells him where the bunker is and promises him that it's a safe place. Now Daniel tells him that they also have other places to go when it gets too cold, so again, remember that for a little bit later in this breakdown. Now, in a tender moment, possibly for the first time, these kids have experienced genuine kindness from an adult, not trying to exploit or kill them, as X reads James and the Giant Peach. We see Daniel finally gets to be a kid again, peacefully drifting off to sleep on X's shoulder. Now outside, X hears activity. One of the men who found his plane earlier, now armed with X's own gun, confronts him. He realizes X isn't surface hardened, having clearly spent the last 3 years sheltered. Now the man reveals that he's actually been tracking the kids for the last few days, and driven by a primal need to protect, we see X attacks him. Now despite his injured knee, we see X fights like a father defending his own, and he ultimately gains the upper hand and kills the man. Now the kids see this, and instead of acting in fear, they actually bury the man's body into the mud, that way no one can find the body and possibly could be looking for them. Now, how in the world would these kids know to bury this man in the mud? To me, this suggests that they had to bury others before, perhaps their loved ones or possible other threats. Which, to that point, we know that this man wasn't alone, so I wonder if the other men, if they were maybe a part of a larger group, which now has weapons to their disposal, if they'll put 2 and 2 together and they're going to go looking for X if they find the body. Now, Daniel's sister walks up to X and says that he's badly hurt, and it's here that X realizes that he's been stabbed and he passes out yet again. The next morning, Xavier wakes up, bandaged up, but alone. The kids are gone, his bag is gone, his supplies are missing, they took it all. The only thing left is the picture of his kids and the words left on the table saying sorry. Now, I could be wrong, but as I said earlier, X put that map of where he can find Terry in Atlanta in his pocket, so I would imagine he still has that information on him, but based on his reaction, maybe they took it out of his pocket. Regardless if he has the map or not, which I guess it is important if he has the map, but either way, without his other gear, his journey to find his wife is going to be extremely hard. Now, backtracking a bit about the location of the kids. Again, remember, Daniel said that they have other homes, so did they just simply go to their other home still in Arkansas or maybe somewhere in Memphis, or are the kids going to make a journey to the bunker? Either way, I don't think this is the last time we're going to see these kids. I feel like they will return in some capacity because their presence in this episode, in my opinion, represented hope in the dark world that they're in, and they represent the future of the new world. Now, dehydrated and recovering from both a knee injury and after being stabbed, we see X returns to the crash site and he starts calling out his wife's name, but his body has gone through way too much and he falls out yet again. It's here that we tie back to the end of episode 1 where Annie arrives and she puts him on his horse to take him back to Graceland. Now, as we come to the close of this episode, we go back to the flashback where X is still by Terry's side, helping her through her recovery, but as time goes by, we see that eventually she regains her sight. Now, back to present day, we find X waking up in Graceland. Now, X tells Annie about his kids and Terry and the bunker, which immediately, once he said the bunker and the location of the bunker, that caught Annie's attention because obviously that's where Link's headed. As we see the flashback of the past and also the vision from the future for the third time in this episode, but this time around we have full context of at least one of the visions. The past flashback vision comes from where Terry told him to come to her after she fully regained her sight and we watched them kiss for the very first time. But it's also here that we see the future sight where Link turns around and we can see it's his full face. Now, I already shared my crazy theory earlier in this breakdown about this maybe being a future vision, but there's something else I'm thinking about. There has to be a reason why X is remembering his first kiss with Terry, but also seeing Link at the same time. Could this vision from the future be Link taking X to Terry, that being the reason that it was shown to us 3 times in this episode? Putting my crazy sci-fi mind vision theory aside for a second, maybe the idea is the show showing us as an audience that in the future, X will be seeing this from his point of view, but we're going to be seeing this is again where Link is maybe taking him to his wife. Now, X is desperate to get to Atlanta, obviously to find Terry, but for the first time since meeting her, we see a different side of Annie. The sweet mother-to-be is holding her gun, and we see X is handcuffed to the bed, and she demands that he be her guide to go find Link, the father of her child.
Here by random happenstance, or are you here because you are supposed to be here with Alex and me? 50% chance of rain, 50% chance of sun. Today I am choosing to believe in the sun.
Now, while I enjoyed the more intimate character-focused moments that we saw in episode 1 and 2 of the season, I personally found this third episode to feel more like season 1 of Paradise. We check in with various characters, the pacing's moving a little bit faster, there were some major reveals, we got a cliffhanger that really got me excited to see what's going to happen next. We're here breaking down this third episode of season 2 of Paradise. This is an episode that showed us a lot of characters put on a faked act to get what they need. Now in doing so, we see some familiar faces of those who are both dead and alive, and we finally meet Alex and get a better understanding of Link's past and if things are random or if they are meant to be. With all that being said, we got an episode to break down. Full spoilers ahead. We open this episode with Sinatra, who's still in a coma after taking that shot in the chest from Jane in the season 1 finale. But while her body is still, her mind is racing to trying to figure out how to beat time. As we flash back to the conference where Sam met Dr. Lodge for the first time. Now, over some very expensive drinks, Dr. Lodge breaks down the Venus Syndrome. He explained that the global tsunami we saw on the day of the event was just Act 1. He goes over that those who survive, which we have experienced in episodes 1 and 2 of this season with meeting Annie and Link and those kids, but unfortunately, it's not over. There's a part 2 to this catastrophe, which involves the heat that will eventually subside within an atmospheric pressure that will arrive to crush everything left standing. Now, Sam thinks that her billions are the ultimate shield. She knows that living in a bunker for generations isn't the answer, but the doctor assures her that even her money can't buy what is needed to stop the inevitable ending, and that being time itself. There's been no billionaire in the history of the world that can outrun time. Now, this conversation is what really sets the stage for Sinatra's new obsession, and that being a solution that goes by the name of Alex. Now, we flash back to the hospital to find Sinatra finally waking up. Now, this flashback, or in Sinatra's case, this memory sparks her to finally waking up from her coma to get things going again. Now we jump back to the night where Kyle was elected president, and amidst the celebration, Kyle promises that there will be no more red tape that will get in Sinatra's way as she wants to complete the bunker, but Sinatra isn't satisfied with just creating the bunker. Now we see her and Kane discuss a developer who refuses to sell, which leads to the mention of a secret technology that the fate of the world depends on. Now Kane suggests that they get another person involved to help them with their developer problem, this being the true birth of Sinatra's persona, where she finally gets her hands dirty to secure the future. Now back in the present, Sinatra learns that she's been out for a month, which means this was a whole month without being in control. Now in her absence, President Bain has turned their community into a community with police presence and promising stability and strength, which really just means more cops and less freedom. Now we see that the rebellion is still alive though. We see this X symbol being placed on the library doors, a tribute to Xavier's exposure of the truth as we see a person who left that there getting arrested. We see Presley and Jeremy have exchanged secret notes, and we learn that Jeremy's friends have been taken to a secret prison. Their bond has grown, but this letter being the start of him setting his plans in motion for what happens later in this episode. Now we catch up with Robinson as we flash back to the night that she promised to take care of Xavier's kids while he's away on the surface. We see Jane walked in that night to keep her act by telling her story and that Sinatra is still alive. Now we watch as Jane puts on her innocent act and pretends to not know what happened when she shot Sinatra in protecting X, which, speaking of X, he still doesn't suspect her of her wrongdoings. But it's here that we see Robinson starts to question her by calling out why was she there to begin with, and we see Jane makes up some story, but again it's important to note that Robinson was slowly starting to see through her lies. Now this is where X comes up with the plan to take blame for everything that happened before leaving to search for Terry, and he tells Robinson to hold off on fighting back until he returns. Now back in the present day, we get a glimpse into the new dynamics as Robinson keeps her promise by looking after X's kids. Robinson just wants the kids to stay out of trouble, mostly Presley, until their dad returns with their mother. But it's here we see that James is actually helping his sister in communicating with Jeremy. Now we see that Robinson was demoted, basically replacing Jane in her old job, as Jane was looked at as a hero for taking down Sinatra, and she's now the president's main security. We see the new president-elect who has his own act going on as a person who believes that he actually has power, as he assures the billionaires that things are going to get back to normal in the community. He wants to start implementing seasons again, starting with summer, a move that he believes will get the community back on track. But it is here that he learns that this will be a difficult task because Sinatra has her own secret project going on. Now, this project isn't known to anyone in the room, and respect is the last thing Bane will get from anyone in this room, which leads to Anders sharing his mind about the president's plan being a stupid idea because they're already maxing out most of their energy. Now, this level of disrespect gets him arrested, and the president demands that he gets access to the Sinatra secret project as soon as possible. Little does the president know that this demand to look into the Sinatra project will lead to his demise. Meanwhile, a different kind of act is at play at the hospital. We see Sinatra, who's also putting on a good performance as well, in front of her family and others, as she's leaning hard into the Samantha being a vulnerable victim. Speaking of acts, we see Jane paying her a visit as Sinatra tells Jane that she doesn't remember what happened when she got shot, as Jane tells her that it was X that shot her and the whole town knows this. Jane tells her that she did what she did to keep her hands clean, and she also shares that the president wants to speak to her. It's pretty clear that Sinatra believes that pretending right now is her best option, but regaining control is her main objective sooner rather than later. Now, before meeting with the president, we see Gabby greet Sinatra, prepping her for the lie detector test. Now, on a side note, we see James reads the hidden note from Jeremy to his sister, suggesting a meetup before Jeremy leaves for a while. But it's here we see James thinking he's protecting his sister by throwing it away and again prioritizing his sister's safety. Now, in the interrogation, we see Gabby starts with the basic questions first before getting personal by bringing up that she's a mother of two, but one of her kids being deceased, which we see Sinatra confirms. Now, Gabby immediately follows that up by asking if she's siphoning off energy from the bunker, which triggers a very important flashback. It's here we witness the very first meeting between Samantha and Billy, aka the Fixer, this being the person that Kane recommended to handle their developer problem. It's evident in this moment that this is new territory for Samantha, her hiring a hitman to intimidate or threaten or even eliminate someone. Again, you can tell that this doesn't come easy to her at first. Now, sticking with this flashback, we go to Billy on the job to take care of the developer. We see the developer shares with Billy what he does for a living, which is a mouthful. Advanced wave function, superposition, and quantum entanglement. Now, I'm no expert, but looking it up, it seems like entanglement goes hand in hand with another quantum phenomenon known as superposition, which is particles that exist in two different states simultaneously. From what I understand, it's almost like Schrodinger's cat theory. This is where he illustrates a paradox of quantum superposition where a hypothetical cat may be considered both alive and dead at the same time because its fate is linked to a random event that may or may not occur. Now, remember that last part for later because it's very important to understand what Alex might be. Now, the developer feels a lot more comfortable around Billy as he shares with him that he has his business partner who's actually much younger than him and is so great in his field of work, he's super intelligent for his age, as we'll later find out that this partner is no other than Link, who we found out in episode 1 actually went to Caltech to study to be an expert in technology. Now, the developer considered Link as a son to him because, as we'll find out, him and his wife couldn't have kids, as Billy Billy just cuts the act from being a random friendly guy at the bar, and he shows him the papers that need his signature, and that being option A, which is the easy way. Now, the developer asks Billy if he believes that things are random or if they happen for a reason. Remember, we discussed this very thing when we talked about the quantum entanglement. The developer plays along and signs after Billy lets him know the other option, which involves the gun in his pocket, which leads him to signing. But after he leaves, Billy realizes he didn't sign his name, but instead he left him with his own home address. Now, we'll come back to this in a bit, but in the meantime, let's hear from the sponsor of today's video, Factor.
Look, I'm going to be honest with you all. I am not a fan of going grocery shopping. It is so time consuming. I have to shop at so many different stores because one store doesn't have the one thing I need. It is just one giant headache for me. So that's where Factor comes in. Whether it's cold days or you have big goals and you have no time to cook, Factor makes healthy eating easy with fully prepared meals designed by dietitians and crafted by chefs. So eat well without planning or cooking. Look, for me, it's all about convenience and it's all about having options, and that's why I believe Factor is such a perfect fit for my lifestyle. Quality, functional ingredients including lean proteins, colorful veggies, whole food ingredients, and healthy fats. No refined sugars, no artificial sweeteners, no refined seed oils. Meals that fit your goals and schedule, healthier eating, calorie management, more protein. The variety is so great because you have 100 rotating weekly meals to keep things fresh and delicious throughout the winter. Options include high protein, calorie smart, Mediterranean diet, GLP-1 support, and ready-to-eat salads. Plus, the new Muscle Pro collection supports strength and recovery. And I mean, the convenience alone. It's always fresh, never frozen, ready in about 2 minutes, no prep, no stress. Right now for me, I'm trying to get back on my healthy kick, so having the available proteins and having the vegetables and the whole foods ingredients is just a perfect fit for me. So head over to factormeals.com/moviefiles50 off and use my special code MovieFiles50 off to get 50% off and a free breakfast for 1 year. Again, that's factormeals.com/moviefiles50 off. And again, use my code MovieFiles50 off to get 50% off and free breakfast for an entire year. Eat like a pro this month with Factor. Now, this is for new subscribers only and varies by plan, and one free breakfast item per box for 1 year while subscription is active.
Now, back in the interrogation, Sinatra voiced the question at first, but eventually says that she hasn't been taking any power from the bunker, and the lie detector says that she's telling the truth. Baines throws a temper tantrum, letting her know that he's boss now, and Sinatra plays along by agreeing that he's in charge, but then she says something very important.
That man needs a breath mint.
And we see Jane smiles because she knows exactly what that means for someone in her line of work. Now, as the president is leaving, we see Robinson gets to see Jane in action again. We watch as Jane strokes the president's ego by letting him know he did a great job in interrogating Sinatra. Now, this compliment leads Bain to telling Jane that she's smart and he values her opinion, and this being all a part of her being on his good side. Now, you'll notice during that exchange that Robinson looks at Jane as if she is watching a person get into someone's head, and that this whole innocent act is all for show. Now, Robinson decides to go to do some digging on Jane, and she finds Jane's mostly redacted CIA file. Now, her big takeaway is that in 2016, Jane was actually kicked out of the CIA for assaulting a senior officer. Now, this sends Robinson down a rabbit hole into Billy's coroner report, where she finds Jane's statement claiming Billy felt like he had nothing to live for, which doesn't add up considering how we know he felt about X and his kids. Now, Robinson goes to Billy's house and she finds an engagement ring. Billy was going to propose to her. He had his future planned out, which again contradicts Jane's statement. Now, the tension peaks when Robinson gets the message that Jane is currently alone with the president on a jog, as she's now officially terrified of what Jane might do. Meanwhile, back at Sinatra's house, we see Gabby drops by, and you notice that she's also another character who is putting on an act and is pretending to be someone that she isn't. These two have so much history, and for a second, they feel like they're old friends again, just having a good time. As Gabby tells a story about her father selling a car that he spent years trying to fix. Her point being that some things just aren't worth fixing anymore. Basically, she's done with Sinatra. But before leaving, we see Gabby leaves her with an old picture of them for Sinatra to keep. Now, back at the Collins' house, we see James tells his sister about the note that Jeremy left her about meeting up with him for one last time for a while, as we see that she heads off to meet him. Now she arrives to the location, but unfortunately it's too late as Jeremy purposefully gets arrested as a part of his plan. Again, another character pretending to be something, as we see that this was all a part of his plan to go to the secret prison to talk to Anders, who he saw get arrested at the start of this episode. Now going back to the Billy flashback here. It's the next morning where Billy goes to the address and he's prepared to follow through with the other option, which involves his gun. Billy goes inside and meets the developer's wife, who happens to have Huntington's disease, which is an inherent disorder that causes nerve cells and parts of the brain to gradually break down and die. Stick with me here for a bit. There has to be a connection between Alex, who we'll discuss here next, Terry, Link, and Annie. Finding out that Alex had Huntington's disease and knowing that Annie's mom struggled with mental health and Terry is a scientist in the field of studying cells and DNA. Now granted, Terry isn't a doctor, but I do wonder if Terry and the developer ever crossed paths and maybe trying to figure out a way to cure his wife. I just have this feeling that whatever we're dealing with this season regarding this mystery technology, it has to do with health and cells and quantum physics, as well as Link and Annie and Terry. I think they'll all be key players into wherever's going on with this Alex project. Now, knowing that his time to die is near, we watch as the developer shares his wife's outlook on life and how positive she was. Now, unfortunately, he ends up ending his wife's life and putting her to rest, and it's here that we find out that her name is Alex. Now, we know Alex was the name that Link mentioned that needed to be killed back in episode 1. But we just saw Alex die, so what did he mean by we need to kill Alex? Well, I don't think that he was referring to the Alex that we just saw die. I believe Alex is probably an acronym, or it's the name that's being used for the mystery technology that Sinatra wanted from the developer and now has in the bunker. And if you all remember in episode 1, Link said to Annie that there was something very dangerous that no one knows about in the bunker, again, that being the Alex technology. Now, before Billy does what he came here to do, we see the developer brings up again and says to Billy if he thinks things are random. Now, the developer hands Billy a tissue and he tells him to please not to harm the boy that's about to arrive and to let him go because, like Sam said earlier in the episode, the fate of the world depends on this promise. Now, Billy eventually shoots him in the head, and we watch as he leaves the room. He runs into this boy, and it is Link as his nose starts to bleed. Billy tells him to leave, and he tells him to run away as far as he can, and he tells him that this is the luckiest day of his life. That is a lot to take in, and not a lot of time to discuss all of the theories that's going on in my head right now, but I'll stick with this. Time, happenstance, are things planned or random or predetermined? Can you be in two places at one time? Can you be dead and alive at the same time? Whatever we're dealing with involves the element of science fiction, and I'm beyond excited to see where this goes. Now, I do want to mention that it appears that when you are near Link, he causes your nose to bleed. We saw X nose bleed in episode 2 when he was in a plane, so I'm wondering if X was in the air, did he maybe pass by Link and that's what caused his nose to bleed? And more importantly, why is it that your nose bleeds when you're around Link? Does he have some type of technology that was implemented in him that causes neurological issues with your brain and causes you to nosebleed? Is Link a human being or is he something else entirely? Which makes me wonder, that baby in Annie's stomach, is that a human baby or some type of AI generated cyber child? Again, science fiction seems to be the route that we're headed. Now, as we come to the end of this episode, we see Billy informing Sam that the job is done, and this being the start of their relationship. Sam wants to know what is needed if she needs his services again, and he tells her that all she needs is a name and a photo and to say these very words, which is they need a breath mint, which is what Samantha said in the interrogation room to Jane, who was also in that room. Which, speaking of, back with Jane and the president on his jog, we watch as she takes care of him by cutting his throat and killing for Sinatra and following her orders. She marks his back with his own blood and leaves an X, which is known in the community as a symbol for those that are ex-believers, but now it will be seen as a symbol for yet another president's death. Robinson arrives to find the body as Jane sneaks up behind her and chokes her out and sets up Robinson as the killer of the president. As we go down these various floors of the bunker all the way to a lower level to find the secret prison where Jeremy will be now staying. Jeremy walks up to the creator behind the bunker, Anders, and tells him that he will help him blow the doors wide open. Now, a couple things I want to point out in this last moment here. One is this particular shot of this level. I wonder if this is where that secret technology known as Alex is. Another thing I want to point out is on the back of Jeremy's prison outfit. You all will notice this is the exact same flower symbol from Kane's bookmark. It's the same flower signal that the gardeners wore on their outfits in season 1. It's the same flower signal that the construction workers wore who built the bunker. Do you all see a pattern here? This symbol is clearly important and to me is a symbol of a secret society that Kane and Sinatra are a part of, and I believe we're going to learn more about them hopefully later in the season. Now, speaking of that secret society, we end with Sinatra talking to her housemaid by the name of Carmen. Hate to sound like a broken record, but yet again, another character pretending to be someone that they're not. We learn that Carmen is more than a housemaid. She's aware of the secret project and is a part of this secret unknown group as Sinatra drops the act of Samantha. They talk about Alex and the power problem being resolved, aka killing Baines. Alex doesn't have any messages nor an estimate for Sinatra because it's unpredictable, but she's getting closer. As we see, Gabby planted a microphone in the photograph she left with Samantha as she listens to this very conversation.
I have a plan. For you. For all of us.
What kind of world do you want to believe in? Is it a world filled with pain, loss, suffering, or a world filled with joy, love, and hope? Well, this 4th episode shows both sides of the question as it comes with a very heavy emphasis on believing in humanity and welcoming the world with kindness despite the storms and fears that come with it. I knew that Annie would be a character of importance, but I didn't know that she would come with such a strong and powerful and emotional story. As we say goodbye to a character that I thought was going to stick around a lot longer, but at the same time, we say hello to this same character's future and her legacy. We are back breaking down this 4th episode of Season 2 of Paradise. We see Annie and X get to learn and trust one another as they go on a journey to find their loved ones. Meanwhile, we flash back to a time when Kyle's optimism in the future in the bunker leads to Sinatra sharing a secret. With that said, we got a lot to discuss, full spoilers ahead. We open at a camp where we find Link experiencing the shattered mirror that may point to multiple versions of himself in a dream, and we see the same vision that X had, but from Link's perspective. We see Geiner wakes up Sleeping Beauty Link to tell him that the train's still delayed, but Link doesn't care. All he wants to do is find the bunker as he instructs all the survivors within the camp that they are moving out. Now, a couple things I want to point out about this opening scene. First, this is the larger group Link was referring to in episode 1, the one he told Annie about that he was a part of, and it seems that he is the leader based on him telling them that it's time to move out. Now, let's talk about the bad news about this train. What exactly is this train? Does it contain something that will help them break into the bunker if push comes to shove and they're not welcome in voluntarily? Or does it contain something that can kill or shut down Alex? Or will the train be used to transport Alex elsewhere? Or it could be all of the above or something else entirely. Another thing I want to mention, and is more of an observation. The shots of the people within the group look like a mixture that may have been people that served in the military or the Marines, and there were some people that looked to be pretty regular. There were some young people I saw, some middle-aged people, as well as older people as well. But to be honest, I didn't get the vibe that this group of people pose much of a threat. Now, I could be wrong, but I bring this up because after episode 1, I had mentioned if the crew that Annie met with Link were just cool, nice nerds as they call themselves, but maybe the larger group were maybe more aggressive or evil or bad. But again, based on this opening shot that we just talked about, again, they seem to be more or less like Link. Now, let's talk about this dream. Now, we talked about this in my breakdown last week, as well as reading off you all's theories and comments, and I think we're all onto something here. Now, I explained in depth what the advanced wave function superposition and quantum entanglement was in last week's breakdown, but for those that are new, basically the entanglement goes hand in hand with another quantum phenomenon known as superposition, in which particles exist in 2 different states at the exact same time. Now, we've talked about time travel and quantum physics maybe being an element of this season, but I'm going to go ahead and officially put my bet on this. I believe that at some point in the future, we're going to see both Link and X will come across Alex and something will probably go wrong. And just like I said about the particles existing in two different places at one time, I think whatever this accident may be in my theory will make where X and Link will be both in the past and the future where we see this dream occurring. Now look, I know we just started this breakdown, so I don't want to drop all this science up top, but we'll probably revisit this towards the end of this breakdown, or I'll bring it back into this week's theory video, which is I'm thinking right now that Alex will allow a person to have effects on the past, present, and future when you're around this device, or if something terribly goes wrong with the device. Now, back at Graceland, we see X wakes up as Annie trusts him and uncuffs him so that he can walk around as he realizes where he is. Now, as Annie cracks a joke about him assuming that she was pregnant, this leads us into this week's flashback to the last time that X saw a woman pregnant, which takes us back to the early days of the bunker. Now, this flashback will also serve as the episode's main themes of resilience and hope and having belief in humanity. 3 years earlier, we see President Cal walks into Sinatra's office happy to be celebrating the very first woman to have birth in the bunker. 5 months in, Cal just wants to find a reason to cheer up the community and show them that they can build some sense of normalcy underground, as well as having a future and seeing this as hope. Now, Cal wants Sinatra to join them in visiting the mother, but she has other plans for the day, which involve a meeting about the reactors of the bunker, which we know runs the bunker, and she invites him to join instead. It's here that Cal kind of jokingly mentions how the reactors work. It's made up of an aquifer, 3D printers, and the modular nuclear reactors, which was actually mentioned back in episode 3. But this being the first time we've heard of things that actually run the bunker. Now, an aquifer is a body of rock that is completely sedated and the water is in it and all around it. It can be made up of sand, gravel, sandstone, or other rocks that store and transmit water. Now, of course, we know that 3D printers are machines that allow the creation of physical object from a 3D dimensional digital model. And lastly, we have the modular nuclear reactors. These are normally what power nuclear plants with the power capacity up to 300 megawatts per unit, and I want you all to remember that for later. Now, Cal believes that Sinatra doesn't want to join them in the celebration because of her seeing a newborn child will probably make her think of her loss of Dylan, but she insists that it's just because she has a busy day at work. Now, it's interesting to think about how much this season has been about time and how much it has impacted these characters, particularly Sinatra. Now, the past week, the question about who and what is Alex and are we possibly exploring time travel elements was definitely a hot topic of discussion. Now, to add more fuel to that burning question, the idea of Sinatra having the capacity of having a device that can travel back in time to save her son or to simply see him again is not out of the realm of possibility. This idea came up to me after watching the recap at the beginning of each episode. At the beginning of this very episode, they made a point to show us the scene from season 1 where Sam told Gabby in her therapy session that she disagreed with the notion that time heals all, but instead she said that time is making it worse because it's taking her further away from her son who was alive. Again, all these clues seem to point to the evidence that time travel, or at the very least, some kind of connection to time or the manipulation of time, will be a central part of this season's plot. Now, back in present day, we see X continues to let Annie know how important it is that he goes to Atlanta, but after sustaining his injury, which he needed stitches to his spleen, Annie tells him that he won't be going anywhere anytime soon because he's going to need 2 weeks to heal. But once he does, first place they're going to be going is to the bunker, according to Annie. As they briefly discuss what the bunker's like, he lets her know that Atlanta is the first priority as they exchange names. Now, we get a scene that shows us the 2 weeks of time passing by and showing us things like X healing. We see Annie taking care of her horse as well as monitoring her pregnancy. We also see them getting to know each other a little bit more and getting a chance to build trust in one another. Now, we see Annie having a look of concern when checking her blood pressure. Meanwhile, X is reading Mary Shelley's 1826 The Last Man. This being a nice little detail to what's going on in the show, as the book served as a tribute to Shelley's deceased friends, as well as her exploring her own feelings of isolation after her loss. Now, outside over some tea, we see X takes in the fact that he's getting the chance to see the sunset for the first time in years, as he tells Annie he's strong enough to travel now. He knows he owes Annie for saving him, which he ends up doing by the end of this episode, but he also lets her know that saving Terry is first and it's non-negotiable. Now, for the first time, Annie shares with X that the importance of going to the bunker is to find the father of her child, and she also admits that not going the first time when he invited her was because of her fear of leaving and her fear in the world and the people in it. Now, we watch as X comforts Annie about her overwhelming feeling about her fears of the world, as she's also obviously fearful about being a parent for the first time, but he lets her know that ultimately it all comes with endless amount of joys as well. Now, Annie shares with X that she didn't really have trust in people prior to the event, but in the last 2 weeks, it appears that she now trusts X and makes him make a promise to her that after he finds his wife in Atlanta, which she'll be going with him to find her, that he will take her to the bunker, and we watch X makes this promise to do so. As we watch them leave, which means Annie's leaving Graceland for the first time in 3 years as their journey to find the people they love begins. Now, I want to go back to that scene. It's important to look at Annie there because we see that she's starting to cry. I believe this is where she started to think and know that there is a possibility of what could happen to her if her baby arrives, which makes this journey that she's about to go on hit even harder because she didn't want to be alone when giving birth, and she needed to know 100% certain that the person that she's going to be leaving her baby with potentially is a good person, and that of course be an X. I also want to point out that before leaving, we see Annie's pregnancy log, and we see that look of concern that we saw earlier from her. We see in this log Annie's upper systolic has gone up each day. Her readings are high, and I'm no doctor, but I would think that that means that her blood pressure is high as well. Now, a quick Google search told me that when a pregnant woman has high blood pressure, it poses the following risk. Less blood flow to the placenta, and if the placenta doesn't get enough blood, the fetus might receive less oxygen and fewer nutrients. This could lead to slow growth and low birth weight or premature birth. Now, we know that Annie was a med student at one point, and all of this is weighing on her mind as they are about to hit the road. Now, back to the flashback, and we'll focus on this portion for a little bit here, but it's here that we meet the first baby of the bunker and the mother, Louisa. It's always great to see good old Cal and his moments of optimism as he tells Louisa just how special it is that her son will be the first newborn of this new world in the bunker. It was nice to see Cal making time for her and letting her know that he's going to be here for her throughout this entire process. Now, as they wait for the birth in the lobby, we see that fun dynamic of X and Billy and Cal, RIP to the last two. I really miss their banter, but we learn that the baby's heart rate has dropped and they have to perform an emergency C-section as Cal goes with her to help her through this process and X joins along. Now, we watch as Cal does his best to keep Louisa calm. Now, Cal shares a story about the first time Jeremy was born and how they got into a little fender bender as the doctor told him that babies are built to survive.
Babies are built to survive. They are resilient. They've been found in the rubble of earthquakes 3 days after the fact, alive and well. I promise you, first time that little boy smiles, it's not just going to change you, it's going to change our entire world.
Now, you'll notice in this scene, X listening to Cal, what he's saying to Louisa, and we're going to see X use these exact same words years later. Now, back with X and Annie, they stop by a nearby church to rest. As they settle in, X sees Link's student ID and recognizes his face from his dreams, or as he calls them, memories that he believes are events that haven't happened yet, and he shares this with Annie. But he leaves out the part about the fact that he's seen Link in those memories. Now, this being the first time a character has referred to this experience as an event that hasn't happened yet. Again, as we discussed earlier, I believe this future memory is caused by both X and Link being near or close by Alex, and something's going to happen where, again, I think they're going to be able to see what's happening in the past and future all at the same time. It's the next morning. As they hit the road, we see they come across a group of people. Now, Annie's concerned and wants X to keep quiet, but he says hello to the group of people and he gets no response from the group of four, which includes a little boy and a woman in the back who shows her gun as they pass each other by. Now, this kind gesture by X will later prove to be very effective for Annie in a bit. Now, we have to remember, someone in X line of work, you have to be an expert at reading people. As a Secret Service agent, you gotta know if someone poses a threat or if they're not a threat. And this brief interaction told X all he needed to know about these people for later. Now, you might be saying to yourself, where are those great skills from X when it comes to Jane? And the fact that he hasn't been able to see through her BS, Well, that's another story for another day, and let's just say that Jane seems to be a master at deception and manipulation. Now, X notices that Annie is feeling some discomfort as they make another stop at a diner that used to serve waffles, which, funny enough, Annie said earlier in the episode that she actually was craving some. Little would she know this would be the place that she would have to make the toughest decision of her life. Now inside, we see these two developing their relationship more as we see X showing Annie how he used to swaddle his babies as they talk about the experience of being a first-time parent. Now Annie tells X about a time that she witnessed this gigantic tornado that had lightning inside of it about 6 months ago, and she saw this as like a bad sign, a bad omen of the world in which her baby would be born into, a world of destruction, pain, loss, and death, and storms will be coming. My ex assures her that joy will come as well. Despite the storms coming, believing in people and remembering everyone is capable of a great change and a great love and promise, it's a holy charge. Now, X thinks he's teaching her something here, but in reality, this is just showing Annie that X is more than capable of taking care of her baby. All these little moments and these stories and life lessons that he's been sharing throughout this episode so far, in my opinion, are all proof for Annie that X will be a good caretaker for her baby if something were to happen to her, and he will help the baby navigate through this world that she feared. Now, as they hit the road again, Annie begins to feel pain. Annie confesses that she has been experiencing preeclampsia, which is a high blood pressure disorder that typically develops after 20 weeks into pregnancy. It can present serious risks to both the mother and the child. Now, Annie was afraid to tell X of her condition because she knew that he probably wasn't going to take her on the road, but obviously it's too late for that, as he will have to help her deliver her baby. Now, again, it's important to point out that Annie knew that it wouldn't be a good idea for her to stay back in Graceland, and she knew that X wouldn't be staying in Graceland because he had to save his wife, so she made the decision to leave, knowing that she would need him at some point. Now, X begins looking around the diner for supplies that can help during the pregnancy, but he's not having any luck. He ultimately decides that he'll have to get help and supplies from the people they pass on the road, despite Annie begging him not to go. It is time to trust in others as Annie finds herself alone yet again, and she has to put faith in X in hopes that these strangers will show some kindness and show holy charge. As Xavier runs past their do not trespass sign and arrives at the stranger's front door, he announces himself unarmed and needs help, but no one answers as he enters their home. No one appears to be home inside, so we see X takes it upon himself to take some supplies that can help, but in comes one of the strangers with his gun drawn. Now, X quickly takes out this individual and he apologizes while doing so, and in comes this person's father with a shotgun pointing at X's head as X is currently standing over his son who he just attacked. Now, we don't get to see how X ended up getting out of this situation, but man, I would have loved to have seen that. Hopefully it's in the deleted scenes. Now, back at the diner, we see Annie knows what the outcome of her pregnancy will be as she starts to write a letter for her unborn child. Now, in comes the father who we last saw holding a gun to X's head, and Annie's afraid, but behind him comes others and X here to help. Now, as hard as it can be, and it won't always work, but having belief in people can sometimes prove to be helpful. Now, it's a struggle, but with the necessary equipment and the people there to help, we see Annie gives birth to her daughter. Now, this is cut between Louisa, who's also having her child as well, as we see Sinatra arrives and we see her crying outside watching, thinking about the loss of her son, but also the future of this newborn child coming into this world that she wants to bring back. Now, we see that Annie just had a girl, so the theory that I thought was very interesting, but the theory out there that we talked about in my breakdown last week was some people theorized that maybe Link would end up being Annie's baby, which I wasn't the biggest fan of, just the idea of Link having sex with his mom and him being the baby, but thank goodness we can put that theory to rest. Now, unfortunately, we can also put another theory to rest, as some people thought that maybe Link and Annie were going to be the younger versions who turned out to be the developer and the wife that we met last week by the name of Alex, but like I mentioned, unfortunately, that won't be happening. Now, Annie holds her daughter and experiences the moment of life at full volume, that being what X called what his father would say, which he described as things being in high definition, being fully present, knowing that your baby is safe and made it to the world. Now, Annie knows that her baby made it into this world safely and will be safe with X, but unfortunately, this moment doesn't last long. We watch as Annie starts feeling pain as her placenta doesn't come out and is causing her to bleed. We see Annie yelling at the people to stop who's helping her in a moment as she's accepted what she already knew. Annie hands X the letter that she wrote for her daughter and tells her to let her read it when she's old enough. Annie tells X to find Link and to not let her daughter grow up to be afraid of people like she was, and she leaves him with this holy charge. This whole moment just makes me think about the conversation between the developer and Billy in episode 3. Are things random or are they meant to be? Think about it. Out of all the places X could have crashed, he crashed close enough for Annie to find him. She just so happened to be a kind person and a person with a medical background to save his life. She also just so happened to be a fan of Elvis, just like his wife. She also happened to have fallen in love and got pregnant by someone who happens to be going to the bunker. If Annie never found X, who knows what would have happened to her and her baby? Are you all starting to get what I'm getting at here? This season has shown that things are not just random. They seem to be things that are meant to happen. Now, is this because of the science fiction elements that we seem to be getting this season and Alex has a role in all of this? Or is someone from the future moving these puzzle pieces to affect the past? Now, let's take a break for a second and get real, raw, and honest. I have no problem admitting this, but man, the waterworks were in full effect during Annie's death. I know some people hated episode 1 because they didn't care for Annie and her backstory and they didn't really have any feelings towards her, but for me, I was the complete opposite. I loved episode 1. I fell in love with Annie, and again, seeing her death just hit like a bag of bricks. It just hit me all at once just thinking about how beautiful her story was all in that first episode and how important that episode was, getting her backstory as a kid and her being an adult and meeting Gail and surviving those 2 years alone and meeting Link, and it all leads to her death. And another reason why this hit me kind of hard is the performances. I mean, both Shailene and Sterling K. Brown and the music playing in the background all amplified the emotions in this moment. As Annie looks at her daughter and says that she isn't afraid anymore, and she slowly dies in X's arms. Damn you, Dan Fogelman. I sometimes forget that he did This Is Us, which I haven't seen like a full season. I've seen episodes, and I've also saw like the movie that he did a couple years ago. But man, Dan, damn you, man. He did the same thing to us last year in episode 4 when he killed Billy. But I don't know, man. I think this one hits a little bit harder because of the stakes and her having a kid and everything that we saw from her background. Like, again, I love you, Dan. Damn you. Again, I just can't help but to think about Annie losing her mom and Gail and Link leaving her, and now she dies. I'm here thinking that Annie is about to be like a series regular and we're going to be a fan favorite, which she is a favorite of mine, but unfortunately she didn't get to see it all the way through. But as we know, characters that die aren't completely gone. We may see Annie in flashbacks potentially, or maybe if there is some time travel elements about this season, maybe someone will go back in the past and bring her back. But again, that might not happen. Either way, if this is the last time that we saw Annie Clay, again, Shailene Woodley gave a phenomenal performance bringing this character to life. I hope those that hated episode 1 feel bad now, but no, in all seriousness, what a great job. R.I.P. to Annie Clay, who lived in fear, but died in joy and hope for the future of her daughter. Now, with the help of Gordon and Tony, who X got into it with earlier, we watch as they bury Annie's body in their front yard with her tombstone saying daughter, mother, and friend. As X holds Annie's daughter and now responsible for her and her well-being, but also keeping his promise to his kids, and that's finding their mother. We see some time has passed by and the family helps make supplies for the baby and X on the road as we see Annie's horse refuses to leave her grave. X speaks with the wife who offers to take in the baby, but X has a promise to keep to Annie, and that's finding her father despite the difficult road ahead of them. Now, X recites the exact same thing Kyle said to Louisa about babies being resilient. Whether it's Billy hearing from the developer about not having bars where he comes from, and then years later X saying the same thing, Sinatra reusing Billy's kill code of having a breath mint to Jane years later, and now X reusing what Cal said all those years ago to Louisa. Does it have anything to do with the past and the present colliding, or is it just a matter of the show just doing something really nice, which is a character learned something that meant something to them at a certain point in their life, and we see them using it years later in present time? Now, X thinks about Annie's experience with the storms as the wife shares a story about the real-world event of Toba supervolcanoes. Point of her story being that time keeps moving forward no matter what gets in front of it, and people still find a way to survive against all odds. Now, as we come to a close of this episode, we watch as X, now with the means of carrying the baby, as they go on their journey. As we see the baby crying, we see Annie's horse, who didn't move from her grave since she passed away and hasn't listened to X, but the horse walks over to X and the crying baby, and he sniffs both of them, realizing that this is someone that meant something to Annie, as the horse now has full trust in X. As we watch them leave the farm on Annie's horse with the baby, they're headed to Atlanta. Now, I don't know if you guys caught this, but they didn't give the baby a name, which makes me wonder if X is going to give the baby the name of Annie, or is he going to wait till he meets up with Link and Link's going to give the child its name. Now, our final moments of the episode takes us back to the flashback where we see Sinatra plays Louisa a visit, and she's brought a gift for her newborn son, and she congratulates her. Now, she ended up naming her baby Calvin, which I'm assuming she named after the president, Cal. Now, Louisa hasn't been able to get much sleep lately, as Sinatra agrees to look over her child for a little bit while she gets some rest, and this being the first time that she's been able to hold a child since losing her son, Dylan. Now look, the show has obviously positioned Sinatra as the big bad of the show, but since day one, I've never really looked at her in that way. I've just seen her as a very morally complex gray character. Now yes, obviously, she's not a great person. We know that she's had people killed in the past. Obviously, we know what she did with the developer in episode 3, what she did with the explorers, but again, she thought that she was doing it for the greater good. Thinking about those explorers that she had Billy killed, her mind was she didn't want them coming back to cause panic in the bunker. Obviously, killing the developer was to use his tech to save the world. Now, by no means am I condoning her actions, but again, I see her as the quote-unquote villain of the show, but at the same time, a good villain, a great villain. They are the ones that think they are the heroes of their own story. They're not all bad, they're certainly not all good, but there's someone that does what they believe is the right thing. Now, we've seen moments of vulnerability and kindness from Sinatra, and this being one of them here. We see Sinatra holding Calvin, and she tells him a secret. We see Sinatra telling Calvin that someday he'll be able to see real stars in the real sky and feel the real warmth from the sun. She swears that she has a plan, and she assures that it's not just for little Calvin, but for everyone in the bunker. Now, I'm assuming she's obviously referring to Alex. Remember the flashback earlier in the day, Sinatra had a meeting about the reactor that powers the bunker with the help of all the devices that we talked about. Now we know eventually she's going to be taking power from that device to power up Alex. So I do wonder what happened in that meeting that led her to saying that to Calvin later in the day. Now her making that promise to Calvin makes me think, did she see into the future with the help of Alex? Does Sinatra know what the future holds? Now back with X and little Annie's daughter, we see X reading the letter that she wrote for her daughter about trusting that there are good people in this world. Now this is cut between Link and the group arriving at the front doors of the bunker. Now in Annie's letter, there's a line in which she mentions, and I hate to sound like a broken record, but she mentions how love travels across death and time. Again, will time travel play a factor in this season? Now, as Link walks to the door holding cards for the camera to read, as it says knock knock and apologizing for love actually in them. He wants to speak to their leader and he's asking nicely, but not for long. You know, it's funny to think about that he mentioned Love Actually, but he didn't know a single song from Elvis, he didn't know who Sleeping Beauty was, or Jaws. Which leads me to believe that someone else probably wrote out those cards. Now, we know that President Baines is dead and Sinatra's power is kind of in limbo, so my question is, who's in charge of the bunker and who's going to make this call to let Link in or not? Now, I'm pretty sure that Sinatra will ultimately make the decision, but this also makes me think about this. This whole time, we're assuming that the bunker plot and X getting to Terry is taking place at the same time, but what if it isn't? What if Link arrived at the bunker days after leaving Graceland? What if X has already returned? We don't really truly know the exact timeline of when these events are taking place. Now, I'm going to throw a little curveball at you all. What if we're watching two completely different unrelated timelines occurring at the exact same time? Now, our last scene has X arriving to Atlanta and him and a baby make it to where Terry was last heard from the message he sent out from the radio transmission coming from the city.
As a man steps outside, already knowing who X is, claiming that he's a friend of Terry's. He tells X that in the last 3 years, Terry has been his best friend, has been his partner, and his closest thing that he's had to a sister. But unfortunately, she's been taken from him.
There's something you're not telling me, Gary. I choose sooner rather than later to fess up.
Gary the mailman, a man who seems nice and friendly, a man who went out of his way to save a little boy and a woman despite not knowing who they are. But he's also a man who has been lonely for a long time and is willing to kill his best friend in order to keep this woman he loves from seeing her family. We are back talking about season 2 of Paradise, episode 5. An episode that I don't know how I entirely feel about, if I thought it was good, bad, or somewhere in the middle, but I guess we'll find out as we break it down. Is it possible that Gary has harmed Bean and Terry? Well, we'll be discussing that and much more in today's breakdown. With all that being said, full spoilers ahead. We open this episode 5 years earlier where we meet Gary the mailman as we watch him go through his daily routine at work as he's dropping off mail, and we also get a peek into his home life as well. Now, it's during one of his gaming sessions that we first meet Enos, and they bond over being alone as they slowly become best friends. As they continue to bond, we see Enos mentions Trent after his failed attempt on Cal's life, and they talk about Trent's conspiracy theory about the creation of the bunker. Now, we see the continuation of their conversations about the end of the world and what their apocalypse plan would be as we start to see that Gary is starting to realize that this might actually come true. Edith shares that they can survive with a certain amount of people that do not include kids, families, or spouses, just lonely people just like them, something to remember for the crew that we see later on in this episode. Now, Gary shares with his new best friend his discovery that the post office he works at used to serve as a fallout shelter back in the 60s, full protection from a nuclear bomb and EMPs. As Gary sets his plan in motion with his online buddy to get prepared to bunker up, Gary begins loading up the shelter with valuable supplies with his pension as they gather up the others. Now, from our sports fans out there, we get a little cameo from ESPN's The Get Up as they are announcing the volcano eruption as it is officially the day of the event. Gary immediately goes to go pick up his best friend as they gather up the rest of their needed supplies to take into the bunker. As an emergency alert comes in about incoming nuclear missiles, Gary makes a detour to one of his regular stops where a little boy later revealed to be Bean is neglected by his drug addict parents. Gary shows kindness and compassion and decides to take the little boy with him despite his best friend not wanting kids to be in their shelter. We'll later see that Gary isn't necessarily a trustworthy individual, but his decision to save Bean does show that he was at least a decent person at some point. As Gary and Enos argue about taking another mouth to feed, and as they're gathering up supplies, Bean witnesses an accident, and as he approaches this accident, we see Terry on the phone with X.
Be a good father. Be a good father to them.
Now, this is the same scene that we saw from X's perspective in the conversation we saw in season 1, and at this exact same time, we see that this is the moment that the global EMP was set off as a helicopter crashes in the background. Terry already being a mother at this point, she immediately goes over to Bean to check to see if he's okay as Gary arrives. Sensing some confusion to why Gary has his kid with him, Gary decides to invite Terry to join them in their bunker. Now, I do wonder, what was it inside of Gary that made him want to invite not only Bean, but Terry into their shelter? Was it that he was that lonely that he saw this as an opportunity, as a way to get a family and get friends like he never had before? Again, to me, this is just another example to show us in this episode that this is a complex individual. Even though he does something pretty despicable later in this episode, he does have a heart. Now, back to the present day storyline, Gary explains briefly that he and his crew, including Terry, were together, but his best friend betrayed them and gave up their location. Gary goes on to say that a group of armed men came and took Terry and the rest of his crew. Now, X hits him with a ton of questions about these men and where they came from, but Gary doesn't have any answers for him. From here, let's discuss the story in the shelter, and then we'll tie back to the present storyline after that. It's here we meet the crew that was assembled by Enos. Now, Enos claims that he's an engineer, which we later find out that he wasn't, but we also have Roberto, who's a carpenter, we have Jackie, a mechanic, Ruth, a gardener, Bob, the survivalist, and we have Crystal, the nurse, and we have the new additions, of course, Terry and Bean. Now, unlike Terry, it appears that everyone else in this shelter is alone, no family or friends. In a way, you can kind of look at this as like Sinatra's bunker, but on a much smaller scale. A group strategically put together because of their skills to survive this extinction level event, as they will call this their home for the next 3 to 5 years. Now, over the next 3 weeks, they all have to stay inside as the unexpected members of Terry and Bean are left to share in a bed together. Gary tells Terry that Enos isn't a fan of her being there, as Enos wants to kick her out. Now, Gary shares with Terry that despite not having any instincts, he felt good about Terry after what she did with helping Bean when they first met. He goes on to say that he feels like she's going to be a great contributor to the crew, and she's meant to help a lot of people, and when it's safe, he'll help her get to her family when that day comes. This actually being a promise that he'll later say to X in this episode. Now in the shelter, we see that some more time has passed, and we see that they're starting to get into a routine. Terry notices how Bean needs some type of childhood, and they need to create an environment in which they can grow to be more comfortable around each other. Terry comes up with the idea to letting them celebrating Christmas, which will be Bean's first time celebrating this holiday, as this ultimately lifts everyone's spirits, even Enos, as they exchange gifts. You can see this is where Gary started to look at Terry a little bit differently. He basically saw him and Terry as Bean's parents, his own little shelter family. Now the best gift of all is what Gary gives Terry. He built her a radio so that she can reach out to her family. Now, Gary reads the situation completely wrong as Terry goes in to give him a hug of appreciation, but he goes in for a kiss instead, but Terry politely shuts it down. She tells him how much she's appreciative of what he's done, especially by saving her life and for obviously making this radio, but she lets him know that they're going to be partners and she'll pay him back any way that she can, but it'll never be romantic between the two. Now, Gary agrees to these terms, but deep down, his feelings towards Terry never ended after this conversation. Now, as more time passes by, we see that the crew in the shelter has grown even closer. They're basically a family now, and they're no longer alone. We even see Jackie and Crystal getting married, which Enos isn't happy about because, as we'll learn later on, he actually had a thing for Crystal. Now, 3 years have passed at this point, and this is where we actually see Terry making the message that Sinatra found that was supposed to be for X. Now, as we see day in and day out, and after years of attempting to try to reach her husband, we see the radio is unfortunately destroyed. Gary tells Terry that it was Enos who did this because he doesn't want anyone to leave because this has been the most important he's ever felt. Now, more on the flashbacks in a bit, but let's check in on the present day storyline. Now, before moving on to the rest of this week's breakdown, let's take a moment to hear from this week's sponsor, Factor. You know, I'm going to be honest with you all. The older I have gotten, the less excited I get about going to the grocery store. I mean, from getting ready to driving to the store, finding parking, you get inside the store, they don't have the things you need, and when you're in there, it's packed and it just becomes one stressful time. But that's where Factor comes into play. Somewhere between the first warm weekend and realizing short season is getting close, eating well stops feeling optional. Factor is how I stopped letting a busy schedule be my excuse. Fully prepared meals designed by dietitians and crafted by chefs. Ready in 2 minutes, no planning, no cooking. Just the other day, I had one insane schedule and I didn't have much time for a lunch, so I popped in this peanut tofu bowl that was to die for. I mean, I'm still thinking about it to this date. It was so delicious. Quality, functional ingredients, including lean proteins, colorful veggies, whole food ingredients, and healthy fats. No refined sugars, no artificial sweeteners, no refined seed oils. Meals that fit your goals and schedule, healthier eating, calorie management, more protein. And let's talk about the variety here. I mean, we're talking about 100 rotating weekly meals to keep things fresh and, of course, delicious throughout the various seasons. Options include high protein, calorie smart, Mediterranean diet, GLP-1 support, and ready to eat salads. Plus, the new Muscle Pro collection supports strength and recovery perfect if you're getting back into a workout routine. And of course, we have to talk about the convenience. Always fresh, never frozen, ready in about 2 minutes, no prep, no stress, so you can actually stick to your goals. Look, if you're like me, this is a perfect fit because if you have a busy schedule, you don't have time to prep your meals, cook your meals, Factor is your go-to option. Now, with that said, head over to factormeals.com/moviefiles50 off and use my special code MovieFiles50 off to get, check this out, 50% off and free breakfast for a year. Again, head over to factormeals.com/moviefiles50 off and use my special code MovieFiles50 off to get 50% off and a free breakfast for a year. Now, the offer is only valid to new Factor customers with code and qualifying auto-renewing subscription purchase. Again, head over to factormeals.com/moviefiles50 off and use my code MovieFiles50 off to get 50% off and a free breakfast for a year. Make healthier eating easy with Factor. Back with X and Gary, Gary shows him the destroyed radio and tells him how it happened, again framing his version of the events and making Enos seem to be the bad guy of the situation. Now, for everyone that was complaining about Annie's baby not getting any food or not having any food on the road in last week's episode, we see X now inside, and he immediately asks Gary for ways to heat up the bottle as he observes a mural of the bunker crew and sees that one of them was obviously Terry, which means that Gary was at least telling the truth, that she was at least here. Now, X learns that it's been about 12 days since Terry was taken, and Gary says that he was not able to rescue them as X has him take them to where the crew is. We watch as X observes this crew's location and those who are armed. He can see that they're not a trained unit, but he can also see that they're guarding something very important. Now, it was later confirmed that this is the train Link spoke of in episode 4, but we still don't know the answer to what exactly are they carrying. As I mentioned in my last week's breakdown, I'm assuming they have something that can either kill Alex or at the very least will be able to stop Sinatra from how she's wanting to use it. Now, one of the big questions last week was, what will be the name of Annie's newborn child? Well, we see X kept it pretty simple by basically calling her Annie's baby. Now, Gary paints the picture for X that these people at this new camp with the train are dangerous, but that's not going to stop X, as he plans to save Terry and the others against the 16 armed men, as he plans to create a distraction with a self-made bomb, but he's going to need some supplies, including a battery to do so. Now, Gary takes X to a local market that sells what he needs, as this sparks a flashback to two of the characters from the shelter that's going to actually be a part of the market. Terry is basically a mother to Bean at this point, as we see they set their plans to find X and her family in the bunker. As Bean heads off to get some mushrooms, this is where Crystal tells Terry that her and Jackie will be leaving to live in the market, the same place that we see X in present day. Now, connecting both the flashbacks of the current situation, but now with Jackie, Crystal, Terry, and Bean leaving, we see Gary and Edith are back to being alone again. Now, back to the present storyline at the market, X tries to make an exchange with the man but gets declined because he thinks X is about to start trouble. Now, thankfully for X, Gary is spotted by Crystal and Jackie, who are happy to finally meet the man that Terry spoke about for 3 years, as they help X get what he needs to save his wife. Now, I could be wrong, but I believe this is where X got the notion that Gary was probably lying to him at some point. Gary told X when they first met that everyone was taken from his camp, but clearly that wasn't true because, as we see, here are Jackie and Crystal. Now, Gary retells the story to what happened to the rest of the crew, but you can tell something's off about Gary the more and more he tells the story of what happened to the others. Now, after talking about their time with Terry, X senses that both Jackie and Crystal can be trusted, as he will have them watch over Annie's baby while he goes on his rescue mission.
She always insisted on being the story reader. Said I did the voices wrong. Then I realized it was sacred to her. To be the voice our kids hear as they drift off and dream. If she chose them to read to Bean, she trusts them.
As we close out this episode, we see Enos apologize to Terry about destroying the radio and that he wasn't an engineer, he was actually just a cable guy. He explains why he acted the way he did towards her over their years because he respected that she never gave up for looking for her family.
Perseverance, even in the face of consistent, abject failure to achieve a frankly impossible goal.
Where is this going?
Because I wanted someone I cared about as much as you care about your family. I think that's what I respect the most about you, Terry.
And he also lets her know that once she leaves, that Gary will be heartbroken. Now, Bean returns and tells them that he found a group with a train as Enos and Gary go to check it out. Now, at the train, they are immediately caught. They speak with the person who appears to be in charge of this particular section of the much larger group who are actually a part of Link's group. She explains to them the purpose of this group and the mission of resetting the world, and a part of this includes their quest heading out west for their secret mission, which we know is the bunker, and how it's all possible because of a kid named after a video game. Obviously, she's referring to Link. The woman lets them go, and before leaving, she says they'll be heading out in about 2 weeks, and if they know anyone that has any skills, they can join them on their quest to Colorado. As Enos and Gary head back, Enos talks about how much easier it's going to be for Terry and Bean now that they can simply just get on this train. Now, this conversation is cut between the flashback and Gary telling X his slight version of the truth. Gary finally admits to X that he was lying, that he did love Terry, but she didn't feel the same way, and he makes a promise to X that he will do whatever it takes to assure her safety and getting them back together. Now, during this conversation, we flash back to Gary as he's been silent throughout this time as Enos talks about Terry leaving immediately after they tell her about the train. And as he says this, his best friend Gary shoots and kills him as Bean sees this whole thing shake out. As we end the episode with X and Gary shaking hands as they are about to head off to save Terry.
What's in the bag, Jade? You said Officer Radner only got the promotion because he had a dick. Well, that's not an issue anymore.
Look, I was raised to never call women crazy, but after this episode, I think we can all admit that Jane is crazy as hell. Not only is she crazy, but she's unstable, unpredictable, unhinged, and we find out she was born to be a killer. From birth, she's been burdened to fulfill this life of death and suffering, all prophecies by the unknown entity as Alex. This episode poses the question if you were always evil or if the circumstances made you that way. We are back breaking down this 6th episode of Season 2 of Paradise. In this episode, we find out why Jane is the way she is and why you never want to be on her bad side. Xavier learns that Gary has always had one thing in common with him, and that's taking care of Terry. Meanwhile, Sinatra sets up a plan to meet Link as Jeremy and Robertson make their escape, and we see Gabby makes a promise to take down her old friend. Now, this is our very first episode this season where all the storylines from the bunker and what's going on outside the bunker and we get a flashback takes place. So we got a lot to cover in this episode. So with all that being said, full spoilers ahead. We flash back to May 29th, 1997, back when the world was simpler. And nowhere was more 90s than a cluttered basement in a Circuit City, RIP. Amongst the monitors and all the old tech, something strange happens. One of the employees, a man named Don, gets an email and the sender is an Alex Q. Let's say the Q stands for quantum. The subject line reads, on June 6, 12:01 a.m., a killer will be born. And the body of the email is even weirder. It says she can be stopped when it matters if you deliver a message to her. Now, Don is confused as anyone would be. From here, his beeper goes off with the same message, his landline rings with the same message, then he gets an instant messenger ping, and it's over and over again, and it's coming from Alex Q, and it's everywhere. Now, immediately, my mind goes to, who is Don, and why did Alex Q choose Don? Why did Alex Q wait to a full week before this killer is born? Is Don related to someone we know within the show, or is he just some random guy part of this larger plan? More importantly, who is Alex Q? Also, how would Alex Q know about the birth of this killer, who would be revealed later on in a bit? Now, to answer my own questions, for those that have been following my theory videos after each week's breakdown, this confirms what we've all kind of suspected. Alex Q is the same Alex Sinatra currently has in her possession. It's becoming more and more clear that maybe Alex is some form of a quantum technology machine that can predict or perhaps even dictate the future. This scene all but confirms that Alex's reach extends decades into the past. Now, I could talk about this scene forever, but we'll dive deeper into this later in the week with my theory video. But what if someone from the future sent those messages? Remember back in episode 3, we talked about the advanced wave function superposition and quantum entanglement and what it was. And for a refresher, basically it's particles existing in two different states at the exact same time. So what if Xavier, Sinatra, Robinson, or Presley, or Sinatra's daughter sent that message, or in a surprise twist, what if it was Jane? What if she herself sent the message to her past self and she set this message to kind of set her on this course? She knows what it means, she knows how it shaped her, and she's the only one that can stop her. Now we flash forward to a week later, June 6, 1997. We're in a hospital, but there's no joy here. We find a woman in labor, but she's all alone, no partner, no family or friends, just her screaming to get the baby out of her. By the next morning, we see the baby is born, and it is crying, reaching out for some type of maternal warmth, but the mother, she's just a ghost. She just lays there with a look of profound sadness and honestly, a look of disappointment. It was like she already knew that her child is a lost cause. Now, as she's discharged and walks out of the hospital, we find Don is outside waiting for her. He looks kind of terrified, and he looks like he hasn't slept in over a week, and you notice he's wearing his same work outfit. He approaches her and repeats the exact same message Alex Q sent him just a week before about the baby being a killer, and the baby is revealed to be Jane.
Holy shit, it's her. Listen to me.
She's a killer.
Security.
Not now, but she will be. But she can be stopped.
Sir.
She can be stopped when it matters.
Security.
I have a message for that baby. I have a message for that little girl. She can be stopped.
She can be stopped when it matters, not now, not when she's 5, but when it matters. Now, to me, this implies a particular point in time, let's call it a fixed point, that Alex Q is waiting for. But who will be the one to stop her, and what is the point in which it'll matter when she needs to be stopped? Let's break down the importance of this scene. This interaction between Don and Jane's mother is the catalyst. By delivering that message, Don basically cursed Jane. He planted the seed in her mother's mind that her daughter was a monster before she even knew her name. Think about the environment Jane grew up in because of this one message. If your mother looks at you every day and sees a killer because a stranger at a hospital told her so, do you ever really have a chance to be anything else? To me, this is the ultimate nature versus nurture conversation, but the extreme version of this in a nightmare scenario. This brings us to the core theme of this episode, predeterminism. We see Jane now in the present, and she is exactly what the message said she would be. She's a force of death and destruction. But as we watch her path throughout this episode, I want to ask you all this question. Did you feel bad for Jane? Is she a cold-hearted villain, or is she a victim of consequences that was engineered before she was even born? If Alex Q is a quantum computer that can see the future, was Jane always going to be a killer, or did Alex Q make her one by sending Don to that hospital? Was there ever a way to break this outcome, or are these characters just lines of code in a program Alice Q has already finished writing? Again, I can't help but to think ahead, but who will be the one to stop Jane? And will that person be acting out of free will, or are they just another pawn of Alex Q? Flash forward to the present, or at least how we perceive to be the present, as we see Xavier explaining his plans to Gary. Now, Gary's only job is to do absolutely nothing but to watch out for Xavier as he sets his explosives, which aren't meant to hurt anyone, but they are meant to pose a threat. But if anyone gets in his way, he's willing to break some necks. Meanwhile, back at the bunker, we see Robinson being put in the underground prison, and Sinatra sees Link and his group are outside. Now, this brings us to Sinatra's house, where Jane arrives to pick her up for a meeting, and she runs into Sinatra's security. Jane gives them a very clear, "don't F with me or you'll find out" warning, which at this point, let's be honest, it's probably good advice when you're dealing with her. Now inside, Jane is playing strategist. She tells Sinatra about the unwanted guests outside and suggests a power move by arriving to the meeting late to re-establish her dominance. Sinatra loves it, she compliments Jane, and you can see how much that means to her. Jane views Sinatra as a mentor, maybe even a mother figure, and she thrives that approval. But as we're about to see, Jane's history with mothers is very complicated. Now before they leave, Sinatra's daughter is worried about her mom returning to work so quickly. Sinatra gives her a hug and a kiss, promising she's fine. It's a sweet moment, but for Jane, it's a trigger. It sparks a flashback to when Jane was maybe around 9 or 10 years old. In this flashback, we find a young Jane having a tea party. She's alone and she's talking to her imaginary friend as her mother walks in and immediately shuts it down, telling her that she's way too old for that, and she demands that she goes downstairs to eat her dinner. Now, a couple things to unpack here. I'm not sure if this is her mother's house or her boyfriend's house that we see in this scene, but if it is her mother's, they seem to have a wealthy lifestyle based on the decor of the living room, and they have a private sauna in their backyard. Now, questions I have after seeing this moment is, does Jane come from money? Again, we saw her mother didn't have anyone by her side while having Jane. Again, no family, no friends. Where is Jane's father? As Jane watches her mother and her mother's boyfriend head into the sauna, her imaginary friend starts talking to her about doing something. Jane watches them from outside the glass with this creepy look as she walks over to the door and she locks them inside and cranks up the heat. Now they begin to panic and her mom starts screaming and threatening her that she's going to be in very big trouble if she doesn't let them out. Now Jane just sits there smirking, and remembering that she's not a killer right now, she eventually lets them out. She blames her imaginary friend, but her mother isn't having it. She throws Jane into the sauna and she locks her in, and she tells Jane that that lunatic at the hospital was right. Jane is the worst thing that's ever happened to her. Now this would be the last of the Kid Jane scenes that we see in this episode, so what did we learn here? 1, her mom hated her. 2, she had an imaginary friend who told her to do bad things, and again, she was aware that someone told her mom that she would grow up to be evil. Now, you would have to imagine her childhood was filled with trauma and pain and neglect from her mother, or maybe when she got old enough, Jane eventually got rid of her own mom. I do wonder if we'll ever revisit her childhood again, because it is a large gap of time from when we see this scene to when she's training in the CIA, so I wonder if we'll see this in maybe a future episode this season or maybe next season. Now back in the present, we get this interesting moment of irony. Before Jane and Sinatra leave, Sinatra's daughter makes Jane promise to never let anything happen to her mother. Jane looks her in the eye and promises. Now, think about this for a second. Jane is the entire reason Sinatra is walking with a cane and just woke up from a months-long coma. The person protecting her is the person who almost killed her. It's a reminder of Jane's capacity for being a psychological liar. Now let's catch up what was going on with Gabriella in this episode. She's still running her own investigation after planting that bug in Sinatra's office back in episode 3, as she's basically obsessed with the one name of this episode, which is Alex. We see Gabriella combs through her logs and finds that Alex was mentioned 4 times in her sessions with Sinatra. The first 2 were just casual, harmless name drops, but then we come across a third one, which is where Sinatra mentions something terrible's happening, and she crossed the line and says that Alex is their only chance.
I crossed a line no person should cross, but Alex is our only chance, and I'm not following. I'm afraid of the person I'm becoming, Gabby. I'm afraid of the person I'm going to have to be in order to save them.
Now, this is probably referencing to the time that Sinatra hired Billy to kill the developer. That was the moment that Samantha began her transformation, like Jane in the flashbacks, into Sinatra. But this also reinforces how vital Alex is in the entire operation. This being the second time Gabriella has heard Alex frame as the key to everything. Now at the Collins' house, we see Presley is fed up with the adults protecting her and not standing up for those who have been taken against their will, as she is just tired of being told that basically they have to wait for their father for them to do anything. We see that she sets off on her own to get answers for the rest of this episode. Now at the meeting, Sinatra tells the billionaires that Robertson is in custody, as Jane follows up by telling them that Robertson acted under Xavier's orders to take down those in power of the bunker. One of the billionaires voices concerns that the community will be left in fear with now 2 dead presidents, but Sinatra assures them that this won't be their primary worry for long. She shows the billionaires Lincoln and his crew are outside the doors. Sinatra fills them in on her intel so far, that being that they've been outside for the last 2 days, they're armed, and they have grown in size since they first arrived. She has a plan, but she wants to do things differently this time around, and she wants a collective decision and acting on her plan, which they all agree to do so, as Gabriella walks out of the room. Now back in the prison, Jeremy continues his pursuit to getting Anders to helping him breaking the doors down, but first, they must figure out a way to escape from this prison. Anders feels his original sin has led him to being in prison, that being a reference to his involvement with the original construction workers in Trent in the season 1 finale. He agrees to help Jeremy by telling him there's a way out, as Robertson can see that they're scheming. I'll be real with you all, I thought this plot point felt a bit slow in this episode, and it didn't really move the needle for me. However, the underlying thread connecting Jeremy and Robertson through their shared history with Cal remains interesting, and I hope there's a good payoff at the end of the day. Back in Sinatra's office, she invites Jane to discuss their past events. Sinatra confesses that Jane terrifies her, but with her closest security guards dead and half of the Secret Service missing, Jane's all she's got. She's the only one left in the bunker who knows her secrets. But before Sinatra can fully trust her, she'll need to know what Jane meant back when she shot her and said that she's no use to her dead. Jane explains herself, she's a killer, she's a weapon, she's always been this. Her purpose is simple. People she respects aim her and she executes for them. To serve that purpose, she needs people like Sinatra. Now, Sinatra tells her plan to handle the outside guest situation, and she needs Jane to negotiate and deliver her terms. Again, aim and execute. Now, this triggers a flashback to 10 years earlier to finding Jane, or Natasha Romanoff, aka Black Widow, in this red room as she's training for the CIA to become a field agent. We see that this is a much greener, less refined version of a killer she'll later become. Now, her superior named Stacy, played by Ryan Michelle Bathay, who, fun fact, is the real-life wife of Xavier Collins himself, Sterling K. Brown, and also an actress in her own right and the host of the Paradise podcast. We see that she takes a keen interest in young Jane, and she calls her into her office. Jane believes she's ready for the field, but Stacy informs her about what's holding her back from getting to the field. While Jane's intelligence scores are off the charts, her psychiatric evaluation says a different story. Jane shares how she had a rough childhood because of an incident that framed her mother into treating her poorly, and she also hears voices in her head sometimes. Stacy doesn't want her to use these as excuses as she teaches her an exercise. It's a mental discipline designed to tap into a deeper part of your mind, allowing her to focus like never before, and it also will help her silence these voices. This relationship would become one that will change Jane forever, as Stacy had no idea that teaching Jane this would make her even more dangerous than ever before. As time passes, we witness Jane training, perfecting the techniques Stacy taught her as she's transforming into an increasingly skilled agent. Now, we eventually see that she passes her field test after fully committing into Stacy's guidance. Now, I did find the misogynistic undertones in Jane's backstory felt a bit on the nose in my opinion, but it is still very fascinating to witness the genesis of Jane's unexpected killer instinct. Now, we see this relationship between Jane and Stacy has grown. We see them sharing dinner at Stacy's home as Jane is filled with excitement after passing her field test. Now, Stacy shares that she lost out on a well-deserved promotion to this less qualified male agent simply because he was a man. Again, I found this particular narrative choice felt a bit lazy in its execution. It just didn't feel as nuanced as some of the more complex themes that this show tends to tackle. Now, Jane asks Stacy why she chose her to take her under her wing.
Because I think you're incredibly special, Jane. And I'm incredibly sad that no one has ever told you.
That right there compliments genuine appreciation from those she respects or looks up to resonates deeply within Jane. Having never received this kind of affirmation from her own mother, Stacy became a surrogate mother, or more or less just a very close friend to her. Someone Jane would do anything for. As we're about to find out, Jane is about to take it upon herself to make things better for Stacy, not getting that promotion that she thought she deserved. It's also in this scene that we get the backstory of Jane's obsession with the Nintendo Wii. Stacy introduced her to them and they would play it together, and it obviously was a bonding experience for Jane and a core memory for her. Again, this is something I would imagine her and her mother never played any games together and probably never had a true bonding moment together like this. This was a prime example of showing us like that kid-like side that we've seen of Jane throughout these first 2 seasons. There's this yearning there for Jane for just simple affection and affirmation, and explaining why those rare compliments mean so much to this dangerous woman that she's going to become. Also, I have to mention the Wii reveal makes me reconsider her relationship with Billy. I always thought that her wanting the Wii at the end of season 1 was like her way of like remembering Billy. That was something they did together, but obviously that wasn't the case. So now I'm just wondering, did she ever really love Billy? Now, back at the bunker, we see Presley talking to Sinatra's daughter. Presley starts putting the pressure on her to start digging into who her mother really is. Meanwhile, Gabby meets with Robertson about Sinatra's ties with Alex Q. Robertson has officially stopped caring and just wants to basically give up and accept being in prison because there's no beating Sinatra. The system is built against her. Now, despite Robertson waving the white flag, Gabby manages to get something out of her, and that's her telling her that she needs to keep her eyes on Jane because she's the one behind the deaths of Billy and Bane. Look, I love me some Robertson, but I'm going to be honest with you all, I wasn't a fan of her not giving a damn attitude in this episode because I just feel like her performance was just a little bit too over the top for me. Now, side note, does anyone else feel like the punishment didn't fit the crime for Robertson? Even in a bunker, you would think that a woman who has killed the president, or again, allegedly killed the president, would be in some like high security hole, not just hanging out in the common area. Now, as I digress, while that's happening, we see Jane stepping outside for the first time in 3 years to meet Link and the others, as Jane uses her super focused skills to key in on how she's going to approach them. We watch as she puts her hair down and she hands over the terms, but immediately she takes Urkel's gun and demands to speak with the cutie with the cards. Now, this being her first time meeting Link, which unfortunately tosses out my theory about them being siblings. It was fun while it lasted. Now Link and Jane negotiate that he'll be able to bring in 5 unarmed men to meet with Sinatra, and can't forget about the slice of pie as well. Now, I could be 100% wrong on this, but that slice of apple pie could have a deeper meaning. I just get this feeling that they have maybe known of each other or possibly have met each other at some point. Again, I'm not saying they're siblings anymore, but I just think about the apple pie being similar to the line of like what we found out what it meant to giving someone a breath mint. What do you all think? Have Jane and Link met before? Remember, maybe she knows of him because of her knowing Sinatra's past and her secrets and knowing that she had the developer killed, and obviously that ties into Alex. And obviously we know Link is tied to the developer and Alex. And on the opposite side, Link knows of Alex, so maybe he knows that Jane message about being a killer and being stopped. Maybe the apple pie has something to do with that message as well. Now, when Jane returns, Sinatra plays her like a fiddle. She knows exactly how to feed Jane's ego and compliments her, and she even rewards her. She gives Jane a Nintendo Switch, and seeing Jane, this cold-hearted killer, light up like a kid on Christmas was both hilarious and terrifying at the same time. She even gloats to Sinatra's daughter to how cool her mom is. As Jane leaves, we see Sinatra's daughter isn't here to talk about how cool she is. Instead, she wants to know why she hasn't named Sinatra and if she had anything to do with the missing people. Now, after Sinatra pleased her little assassin, she tells her daughter that the name is just a code name and she'll look into what's happening with the people that's gone missing in the bunker. It was really fun watching this scene because in my eyes, we're basically watching Sinatra playing a mother to both of these characters. Now back in the prison, we see Robinson keeps up with her last day of senior year high school vibes and approaches Jeremy about noticing his planned escape. She brings up Cal, and Jeremy immediately ends the conversation by calling her a side piece as he walks away. Now, them bringing up Cal made me wonder, will we ever see what happened to Jeremy's mom? Like, seriously, where is she? Also, I'm shocked that Kane, Jeremy's grandfather, and again, his mother haven't gotten him out of prison yet. Now, as we come to a close of this episode, we flash back one last time to Jane paying a visit to the agent who took Stacy's promotion. She kindly requests that he step down from his promotion, and he responds by telling her to get off his porch and shutting the door in her face. Cut to Sunday dinner at Stacy's, who forgot because she was shaken up by the news that the officer was in surgery after getting attacked. Jane completely ignores the news, and she asks if that means that she now has a promotion now that he's essentially out of the picture. Now, you can see the look on Stacy's face that she found it odd that Jane didn't have any follow-up questions to what happened to that officer, as we get the moment of what's in the bag in a move straight out of Seven the movie or out of a Lorraine Bobbitt documentary. Jane reveals she took care of the problem by removing the one thing that officer had that Stacy didn't. Yes, that's right. If you didn't get the subtext, she cut off his penis. Yeah, remember when I asked you all if you felt bad about crazy ass Jane? How do you feel about her now? I'm not gonna lie, that moment caught me by surprise. I actually was like shocked by that reveal. I didn't know the show would go to that level, but I will say, I wouldn't be mad at Xavier if he had Jane take care of Gary that same way after what Gary's about to do to Xavier here in a little bit. Now, back in Sinatra's office, we see Jane fixing her hair like Sinatra and speaking like her and giving herself a compliment in Sinatra's voice. Again, this woman is one piece of work. Meanwhile, we see Gabriella walks in, and this being the first time they're sharing their first one-on-one scene together. Gabriella cuts to the chase and mentions what Jane has done, as Jane responds by saying, well, you know what I'm capable of. Is it best that you be confronting me right now? Gabriella tells her that things won't end well between her and Sinatra and that she will be coming for Sinatra, as Jane tells her that if she wants to come for Sinatra, she has to go through her first. We see Sinatra's daughter messes Presley that she will help find the people in the prison. Speaking of, we see Anders and Jeremy making their escape and they end up getting caught, but Robinson helps them by knocking out the guard and they all escape together. Our last scene is back at the train as Xavier sets up the explosives. As they're all set, X tells Gary that if he doesn't make it, make sure that he finds Terry and tells her what he did to get to this point to save her, and he wants Gary to take care of her as he looks at the picture that she took one last time. It's here Gary shows his true colors as he tells X that it's all he ever wanted to do, which is take care of Terry, as Xavier notices Gary staring at Terry in that same picture as Gary reverses the detonation and the explosive goes off as we watch X tosses the bag. X tosses the bag just in time, but he gets all of the people near the train's attention. Now we see X is disoriented. He's kind of confused on where he is because of the aftermath of the explosion. As we look in the crowd, we see a person kind of rushing through, saying his name, and it is his soulmate, the mother of his children, his wife, his best friend, Terry, or is it? I say that because remember, X had a massive head injury in episode 2 and he just got rocked by an explosion. Is Terry maybe a hallucination? Is she actually there, or is Xavier's brain just giving him one more beautiful lie before he fades out?
Dylan, let's go. Should bounce, man. Not really comfortable here, bud.
Dylan. Your name is Dylan?
Ladies and gentlemen, we finally get the answer to Link's real name, but now the question is, how is this even possible? We are back breaking down this penultimate episode of Season 2 of Paradise. In this episode, we see Sinatra's dreams are coming true. Meanwhile, Jane's prophecy comes true as well. Meanwhile, Xavier proves to be the world's most patient and nicest man on earth as Terry says goodbye to Gary. And we have an ending that leaves us all with so many questions. With all that being said, we got an episode to break down. Full spoilers ahead. We open this episode 6 years earlier where we find Anders with Sinatra going over and explaining the bunker's full operational systems, including the important tank room, and President Cal is on the tour as well as he has Anders explain it all to him in layman's terms. It's briefly mentioned here that a universal remote which controls the entire bunker, and we'll see that later on in the episode. We see Cal sharing his hopes that this bunker will never have to be put to use, but Sinatra reminds him that the bunker is their future. Flash forward to the final moments of last week's episode where Xavier and Terry, who's not a hallucination, she is in real time, real life, and after taking out some guards and getting almost blown away by an explosion, Xavier and Terry are finally reunited. Terry explains to Xavier that the train crew are good people and they're friends and they're willing to help them go back to the bunker. Xavier tells them why he brought the explosive because of Gary the mailman and what he told them. Now, before they can bring Xavier into the fold, we see Dakota has some questions for him to answer first. Let me tell y'all something right now. Ain't no way in hell Terry would be leaving my sight after the 3 years they both experienced. But like I said up top, Xavier is a much better man than me, and he agrees to talk to Dakota in the tent without Terry being present. Now, as Xavier heads into the tent for the questioning, Ruth gives Terry a note from Gary saying that he has Bean and he wants her to come home. So I gotta mention, for those of us who wondered what happened to Ruth and Roberto and Bob, I guess it's safe to say that they all went with Terry to join the train crew. Now, I'm going to say it up top because it will be talked about in this breakdown, so I'm just preparing you all now. I have a major issue with this episode, and it kind of boils down to a couple plots. This plot being one of them, and that is the execution or the lack of good execution involving Gary's plot. First thing that comes to mind right now, and something that really bothers me, is the logistics of how Gary got Bean to begin with. When did Terry and Bean get separated? Because as she has shown us throughout these episodes with her in her relationship with Bean, she doesn't let that boy go too far without her at least knowing his whereabouts. So again, when did Gary take Bean? Are we assuming that he took Bean when the explosion happened? Because if so, how would he have known where Bean was? Again, correct me in the comments, but when did Gary take Bean? As we'll talk about later, there's more issues that I have with this particular plot, but again, we'll focus on that when that time comes. Now, back at the bunker, we get our first major clue for a reveal that happens later that ties into a theory that we have been discussing for a few weeks now. As Sinatra gets prepared for her meeting with Link, her and her husband, Tim, reminisce about old times, back when they were more loving and they were closer in their relationship, all before their son Dylan presumably died. Now, that big clue in the scene is when her husband brings up that Dylan would have been 26 years old if he was still alive. Also, a very important detail in this scene is the suit that Sinatra chooses not to wear. Tim suggested she wear the red one for her meeting because it meant that she was bold and she was in control and had power, but instead she chose another color and another outfit altogether. Remember both of these details for a little bit later. Cut to Gabby, where we see her waking up from a nightmare where Jane kills her. We can see that she's on edge after threatening to comfort Sinatra, and she's nervous that Jane will be coming for her. We see early on Gabby taking a shower, and this will prove to be very important towards the end of this episode. We see her looking through her notes on who Alex is as she writes that Jane is involved, and speaking of, we see Gabby leaves for the meeting as Jane is outside, willing to give her a lift in that very suspicious, weird, creepy, don't know if you can trust her look as Gabby tells her no thanks. Now at Sinatra's house, we see Hadley filling Presley in on her suspicions about whether others are being held and it being below. She hacks into her mother's computer, and our second major clue is mentioned here as she shares that her mother's password for her computer is Dylan's birthday, which is May 16th. Now on the computer, they find footage of Jeremy as Hadley knows exactly where this is as she grants them access to the prison through their wristbands. Meanwhile, Jeremy's mission to open the doors with the help of Anders and Robertson tagging along continues. Jeremy's main objective is to let the people of the bunker make their own choice, whether that's staying inside the bunker or to venture out into the outside world to maybe seeing if their loved ones are still alive. Now, I'll mention I wasn't the biggest fan of two particular plots in this episode, one being Gary, which we'll talk about later, but the other also being Jeremy and what's going on with Robertson and Anders. I can appreciate Jeremy's efforts, and I can understand what the plot of what they're trying to do with Jeremy, of him honoring his father by speaking up and standing up for the people, but the only thing that's missing is the point of view from the people within the bunker. We've seen maybe, 2 or 3 scenes from season 1 and also in this season, especially in episode 3, where we saw that pushback, where we saw some of the resistance from the people inside of the bunker. That to me isn't enough to justify breaking the doors open for such a small amount of people who, let me remind you all, the people in the bunker chose to be in the bunker, and they also chose to leave their loved ones behind. Like, if families were split up, they were like, okay, I'm sorry, I love you, but I'm going to the bunker. Sorry, mom. Sorry, best friends. I hope you guys can survive this catastrophic event. So that to me is something that we haven't spent time with, is that perspective. And honestly, again, this subplot, to me, doesn't hold the weight that I believe the show think it does. Now, at this meeting, they go over the protocol, which includes snipers for Sinatra's protection. One of the billionaires mentions turning on the full lockdown, but Sinatra lists off the reasons why that isn't a good idea. If initiated, it could lead to instability and blackouts inside the bunker, but more importantly, it's a massive draw from the power grid. Now, knowing that and knowing what happens at the end, I wonder if this whole lockdown and meltdown will have any effects on Alex. Now in the meeting, we see this tick for tack between Jane and Gabby continues as Gabby convinces Sinatra that Jane shouldn't be able to be a part of the meeting with Link. Now back with Xavier, he gives the group all the information they needed as him and Terry finally get to share a more emotional moment as we see them embracing one another and they talk about how they never gave up hope on each other. Terry shares Gary's note with him as she tries to explain that Bean is her family, and immediately Xavier understands because he knows what it's like to take in a child as he tells her it's time to go get her boy. Now, to add more pressure to the situation, they don't have all day because Dakota lets them know that they'll be leaving for the bunker soon, with or without them if they don't return in time. Now, on their journey, they play catch up about their daughter's dating life, about Cal's death, and Terry shares a relationship between her and Bean and how important he's become in her life and really was the one thing that kept her going. Xavier lets her know that he's not willing to give Gary a second chance after what he's done, and one mistake by Gary, the mailman, Xavier won't hesitate to get his get back for what happened to them with the explosion. Now in Sinatra's office, Gabby confronts her about coming to some agreement of reestablishing some type of new working relationship between the two since Sinatra's back in charge, as we see Gabby also wants to do this for the betterment of the community. Now Gabby lets Sinatra know that she's aware of Jane's past killings and shares her fears of her potentially being next. Sinatra assures Gabby that she's safe because Jane doesn't act without her guidance. Sinatra shares with Gabby her willingness to make sacrifices because she's working on something important. Now this triggers Gabby to bringing up Alex, which we see Sinatra highly encouraging her to never mention Alex again. Now obviously Sinatra doesn't say why, but we know as an audience the last person to threaten to interfere with Alex was murdered. Now, I think people like Carmen, who remember is the fake maid of Sinatra, and whatever potential secret group they're a part of, who I don't think we've met yet, it's safe to assume that they highly encourage Sinatra to take out anyone who doesn't suppose to know about Alex, and that's why Sinatra told Gabby not to say it again, or else she'll have to do what she did to Baines, which explains the very next scene. We see Jane giving intel on Link's crew to the rest of security as she gets a bing on her phone. It's a map that's tracking Gabby, which means she's got the green light from Sinatra to take her out after showing her that she has knowledge of Alex. Alex is a secret project that Sinatra cannot have anyone knowing about or interfering with, and like she said, she's willing to sacrifice to keep a secret, even if it means she has to kill a person she once considered to be a friend. Now it's time for the meeting as the doors for the bunker open and Sinatra takes a moment to reflect on feeling the warmth of the sun as Link and the others walk in. We see Sinatra handing over the pie and we see him taking a bite and they're making some small talk about Cal's death, but Sinatra wants to get to the important stuff as they both agree to speak alone in the Air Force One. Inside, Link mentions how this meeting is like a Star Wars scene and Sinatra's Vader and he's Luke, which come to think of is actually hilarious considering the movie and considering the big reveal that we're going to get in this episode. Speaking of reveal, we get our third clue, and this is where we see Link telling Sinatra that he's 26 years old. I love this scene so much. I love the back and forth between these two characters, especially what we find out later between these two. But we find out that Link's group actually consists of about 10,000 people, which is pretty crazy. And again, I hope we learn how he became the leader at such a young age. But nonetheless, what I also found very interesting in the scene was the continuous shots of the apple pie. I couldn't tell if the show wanted us to think that the pie was maybe poison or it was messed with, but they really kept showing it in this scene, which again seemed very important. But as the scene goes on, they finally get to what they're meeting for. He wants one of their nuclear reactors to restart the world. Now, it's here that we learn the importance of the pie, and I know last week we were all kind of theorizing that the pie might be a code word for something, but based on this apple pie, Link goes over all the resources needed to make it, and it shows that the bunker has more than enough to spare.
Fresh apples? Meaning greenhouses, grow lights, artificial pollination, irrigation. There's a flaky crust on there too, so butter or butter alternative, meaning refrigeration.
Again, Sinatra just wants him to get to the point, and it's here that he finally says it as he tells her he's here for Alex, and the look on her face says it all. Sinatra denies having any knowledge of Alex, and I can only imagine in the back of her head that she's probably like, okay, I'm going to have to kill him as soon as possible. But that is about to change in a little bit, as again, she says that she doesn't know what Alex is, and she basically just ends the meeting as Link takes one more bite of pie, but then he also takes a pin from the plane, and I'm assuming it's just for a souvenir. Now, during this meeting, we catch up with Gabby, and she's still on high alert as we see Jane is spying on her to set up her next kill. Meanwhile, now in the control room of the bunker that controls the entire bunker, we see Anders instructs Jeremy and Robinson to destroy the oxygen tanks in order to force the doors to be open. Now, I don't want to nitpick, but it's just really hard for me to believe that this billion-dollar, trillion-dollar system can be forced to open its doors by simply hitting the oxygen tank with fire equipment. Also, is it me or was anyone else wondering where are the people who would probably oversee this or security that would be protecting this area? I know Anders said that the system runs itself, and I get all that, but I'm talking about the door. Like, why aren't there guards outside the door to prevent anyone from getting inside? I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that the man who created this would know how to disarm any alarms, but still, at the end of the day, I just find it so weird that there's no security guards, and I know like he wants to atone for his sins, but I was also waiting for him to double cross them because it just seemed way too easy. Again, I just feel like the writers definitely kind of overlooked some small details when it came to this plot and also Gary's plot, because I feel like everything is just very convenient. Meanwhile, back with X and Terry, they set up their plan to handle the Gary situation. Now, Terry convinces X to let her go in alone, but X reminds her that if Gary acts up, he'll shoot him without hesitation. Again, this is another reason I couldn't really get on board with this Gary plot. Again, y'all, ain't no way in hell you can convince me that Xavier would willingly, I don't care if Terry, I understand she's strong, she's independent, she makes her own choices. We saw her leave for Atlanta and that was a terrible mistake. I get all that, but I don't care because after what they've both experienced, especially Xavier, him getting here, or him almost dying multiple times, you can't convince me that he would be okay with letting Terry go in alone with no weapon. She had no weapon, to remind you all, and not knowing what mindset Gary's in after killing his own best friend. Like, again, y'all, you can't convince. I know Xavier is patient. I know he's a nice guy. I know he likes to see the good in people, but it's the end of the world. It's a different type of world, and he has seen the BS that Gary pulls. And I'm just trying to understand how the writers expect me to believe that he would be okay with letting his wife go in there alone without a goddamn weapon. Let me know what y'all think in the comments below, but as we move on, inside, Terry and Gary have Bean go outside as Gary explains that he would never hurt Bean, but Terry brings up him killing his best friend, which Gary claims was a big mistake. Not to keep mentioning it, but another example of why I didn't like this plot. Why didn't they show us Terry knowing what happened with him killing his best friend? Like, what was the moment? Like, what was the interaction? Like, that whole interaction when she left to go to the train people, was Being with her? What did he do with the body? Like, that just seems like a bunch of filling in the blanks that I don't think the show really fleshed that out well enough for me. Again, I can assume this happened, but I don't like assuming. I just show me what happened. Now, of course, they don't want to give away the reveal in episode 6, but I'm talking about like having a quick flashback, at least her and X, when they were talking about what their daughter's been up to, what happened to Cal. That would have been a perfect time to like show a quick flashback, or her just explaining to Xavier what happened. Again, fill in the blanks for us, the audience, because again, I feel like this whole thing was executed pretty poorly. But again, I love the show. It's so well written. The performances are great. It's really clever. It fills in all the details perfectly. But this just felt so sloppy to me. Now, Gary gets overly emotional about how Terry helps him function properly, and he walks over to her very aggressively. And this is where she has to warn him to calm the hell down before her husband takes him out. Now, we watch as Gary just has a full-on meltdown at this point. He's talking about drowning and not wanting to hurt anyone, and how the last 3 years have been horrible for the world, but for him to be with Terry and Bean, it was the best years of his life. Terry tells him that those 3 years were very important to her as well, but unfortunately, they're over. He walks over to the window wanting to die. I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh, guys. It was just, this scene was very over the top for me and kind of very melodramatic. But
If it's over, just let him take me out. Let him kill me.
No, Gary.
he walks over to the window, ready to die. He's ready to call it quits, but Terry steps in front of him and hugs him to prevent him from dying. Despite him being afraid of starting over again and being alone again, she tells him that she believes in him. He can rebuild his life. He won't be forever alone. She trusts that he can find a light again. Terry agrees to let Bean remember the best parts of him, as she tells him that she'll remind him of the man that saved them. As we watch, Terry eventually walks out unharmed and takes Bean with her, and we see Gary watches as Bean and Terry and X have one more stop, and that's getting Annie's baby. Look, you might think I'm being harsh, but again, I love this show. I think the writing and the acting and the messages and the themes and the allegories and all that stuff is so well executed. But this to me was just not that great. If this is the last of Gary in this whole plot, I gotta say it ended in a very unsatisfying manner for me. I know a lot of you all was a big fan of episode 5. If you go back and watch my review, I wasn't the biggest fan of that episode. I didn't think it was poorly made. I just didn't really know what the Gary plot was getting at. And again, based on how this all wrapped up, it didn't really hit the mark. Now, I can understand to a certain extent why Terry gave Gary so much grace, because it goes back to when she denied his kiss in episode 5 and she told him like she's willing to do anything in her power to repay him for saving her and Bean's life by letting them into the shelter. But still, I feel like the show didn't earn the payoff for Gary. Need I remind you all, Gary killed his best friend. He almost killed the main character of the show. And he tried to take his wife by doing the whole fake playhouse son and wife and just to end up alone again. Now, let me know in the comments, how did you all feel about this potentially being the end of Gary's story? Like, I am curious to know, like, when he walked back inside, did he take his own life, or does he think he can start over? Maybe he goes to the market with the married couple and tries to find happiness. I'll end by saying this. Gary better be lucky this isn't the world of The Walking Dead, because if Xavier was Rick Grimes and if that was Lori or Carl or Michonne, Gary would be a dead man. He would be mailing himself his own obituary because he would be a dead man because Rick didn't play no games. But we all know Xavier isn't Rick Grimes. Xavier is a good man. He's a kind-hearted man. He doesn't like to kill people that he doesn't think deserve to be killed. But I tell you this, man, if I was Xavier, I would have lied to Terry. I would have said, baby, you know what? I forgot something on the roof. I'm going to meet you at the market. I would have went back in that post office and beat the hell out of Gary for trying to kill me. Now back at the bunker, as she walks Link out, telling him that the bunker can't be overtaken, he lets her know that he will eventually get Alex. Sinatra responds by saying that she'll do anything in her power to protect Alex, and she refers to Alex as a her. Link gets in her face and calls her out for all the horrible things she's done to get to her position, as Griner sees Link is getting confrontational and he calls him by his real name, Dylan. Sinatra immediately turns back to Samantha again when she hears that name, and she grabs him by his arm and she asks him what his birthday is, as we see both sides draw their weapons. Now, Dylan reveals his birthday is on May 16th. Again, all the lines are crossing up, all the answers are being given to us in this moment, as his nose starts to bleed, and Sinatra does as well as he walks away. But before he walked away, he promises he's going to take everything away that she's built. Now, one little detail that I can completely be wrong about is this. This shot of Grainer here, looking back at Sinatra, is it me or does he resemble Tim, Sinatra's husband, but a much older version of her husband? Does Dylan and Grainer, aka Tim, come from another timeline? A timeline where Dylan lives, but he doesn't have Tim or Sam as his parents? Man, I wish I did reactions for this show like I've done for other shows, because when they said the name Dylan, my jaw hit the floor when his name was revealed, because we finally found out the name of Link, which we all knew that wasn't his real name, but for it to be Dylan, it's great, because number one, we talked about this being a possibility in our theory video a couple weeks ago, and god damn it, it seems to be true. But now the $1 million question is, how is this possible? I immediately, after this episode, I went back to episode 2 of last season, which was the Sinatra episode, because I just wanted to see all the details. It was never shown, but heavily implied, that after about 1.5 years of battling this unknown illness, that Dylan had died. Again, I think there's a lot of details there. We don't know what type of illness Dylan had and what he suffered with. And again, I come from the school of if there's nobody dead. We never saw a funeral, and we never learned again what he died of. So now I'm wondering if he truly died. Again, I know the show has implied that he's died, he's no longer with us, but what does that actually mean? Like, I'm starting to think, did his mom, did Sinatra like do something to him in revolving, like did she take his body and have him be involved or connected to Alex in some way? Man, this week's theory video is going to be a lot of fun, so go ahead and start now. Sound off in the comments your reaction to this moment and what predictions, what theories do you all have that would explain how Link is Dylan. And also, let me know your thoughts and theories on the nosebleed situation. We've seen Xavier have a nosebleed, we've seen Billy, obviously we know Link, aka Dylan, and now Sinatra. I'll share some of my thoughts about that a little bit later, but let me know what you all think about all that in the comments below. Now back at home, Sinatra tells her husband that it worked and immediately starts kissing Tim, and she tells him that she can't explain it right now, but she thinks that Dylan's going to be okay. They continue to get more intimate, and maybe for the first time in years, because she's now happy for the first time since Dylan's quote-unquote death, but apparently he's now back somehow. Now here's the thing about him being back. Clearly he has no knowledge of Sam being his mom based on the conversation, how they interacted on the plane and that whole meeting. So again, it makes me believe that he's from another timeline, but how did he get to their timeline? My brain right now is all over the place about this reveal. Are we talking about a time machine? Are we talking about multiple timelines, quantum entanglements? Hell, are aliens involved? Like, what the hell are we headed towards in next week's finale? Now we go back to the flashback and we see Cal brings up all sorts of things that would try to get into the bunker, but Anders and Sinatra assure him that they've played out every scenario and the bunker can withstand anything thrown at it, and the once impossible has now been made possible. Now, at the end of their tour, we see Cal shares with Sinatra the history of all the fallen empires, including some of the sports dynasties that were once known to be atop of their game, and they were never meant to fail, but they ultimately did. Now, the speech was cut between Dylan making the plans to strike the bunker in the morning as the billionaires see them, and they're scared because they now know they're about to be attacked. With Sinatra missing, the billionaires agree to go on a full lockdown. Meanwhile, we see Sinatra walking into a secret area, and you'll notice something that I mentioned earlier. She's now wearing the red outfit her husband had suggested to her at the start. The one that makes her look bold and powerful as she's about to meet someone or something very important. Presley and Hanley make it into the prison while Robertson and Jeremy destroy the oxygen tanks as they're setting off the doors to be opened. Now at Gabby's, Jane is there with a gun in hand and she makes her moves to take her out, but here is where the prophecy from last week comes true. Gabby used the shower steam to trick Jane into thinking she's vulnerable while she was taking a shower like she was earlier in the episode, as Jane has let her guard down and she gets stabbed in the back. It appears she's dead, and remembering Don's message last week that she can be stopped, and it looks like Gabriella took that message without knowing the message and she killed the killer. Now, let's talk about this scene because it is very big. This is a character we've all been waiting to die, but I kind of feel weird about it, especially after getting her backstory and now she's gone. I guess you can say that the same thing happened to Billy last season. Like, we finally figured out who Billy really was in his episode and he died at the end of that episode. But again, it was all within one episode. So we didn't see Jane die last week. So I was under an assumption that Jane was going to have more to do, but not anymore. She appears to be dead. Now, I guess those unanswered questions remain unanswered. So what happened to her mom? What happened to Stacy? How did she go from being kicked out of the CIA to being the Secret Service, working next to the president? But where's her father? But if she is dead, I guess there is some poetic justice to be had because she was a backstabber and she died being stabbed in the back. And just thinking about, again, the poetic justice of it all, someone like Billy who never expected Jane to kill her because she kept that side of her hidden, and here we are seeing Gabby. Jane would have never expected her to best her, and she underestimated her enemy, and that ended up getting her killed. Now, the only way I could see Jane not being dead is if Gabby feels like she doesn't want to be a killer, she doesn't want to become Jane, she doesn't want to become Sinatra, so she calls for help and she saves her life, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think one of my biggest takeaways, besides the death of this big character in Jane, who again, I know we've all been waiting for her to die, but I was hoping for it to be like a grand finale type of thing, like either next week or sometime in like the series finale. But besides that main death, it's that Gabby most likely can put two and two together and realizes that Jane was sent there to kill her by Sinatra, which means that she fully understands what Sinatra's capable of and she can no longer trust her. But more importantly, she also understands that Alex isn't something to take lightly. Now, unfortunately for the people in the bunker, with two major system things happening at the same time, which is the lockdown and the oxygen tanks being destroyed, it causes a complete system error, and Anders sees that there is a meltdown that's about to happen, and we can see from the screen, this ain't a good thing. Radiation being exposed, oxygen going everywhere, and I don't think some people are going to make it out of this alive. And those people I'm referring to happen to be stuck in the elevator, and that's Presley and Hanley, who I think might be in trouble. Now, I don't know if the show is going to get this dark, but I'm thinking right now, what if Xavier and Sinatra are about to both lose their kids? I mean, think about it. Both characters essentially kind of got their family back in a way in this episode, and they could potentially lose a member of their family now because maybe the oxygen in the elevator and during the shutdown takes both of them out. Again, Sinatra gets her son back in a way, potentially, and we see Xavier gets Terry back in a way, but now, again, it looks like they might lose someone close to them. Now, we end this episode with seeing X and Terry and Annie's baby and Bean on a train as Xavier's nose begins bleeding, and he sees that memory that he has yet to experience again, but this time around, it looks pretty familiar for us, the audience. We see Sinatra makes it to her destination, as when she's walking, you'll see the area is the exact same place from Xavier and Dylan's memory as she enters into this unknown room. We watch as she puts on this lab coat and she begins to put a smile on her face as this orange aura light brightens the room, and Sinatra says,
Hi, Alex.
About 100 miles from here, there is a second bunker. It houses a quantum computer that can stop all of this. In fact, it already has. Go save the world, Agent Collins.
What makes you think I'll do any of this?
I believe you already have.
Ladies and gentlemen, after 8 weeks, we finally got some answers to our big questions throughout this season, but the biggest question is, was this a satisfying finale? We are back breaking down this 8th and final episode of Season 2 of Paradise, where we find out the most information we've gotten about Alex. We mightn't have gotten the answer to if Dylan is really Sinatra's son, and we find out that there has been a second bunker this whole time. Boy, we got a lot to discuss. Full spoilers ahead. Now, before we get into the actual breakdown, full transparency, it is literally 1:44 a.m. on March 30th as I'm recording this. So I'm gonna let y'all know right now, your boy is on one. I set my day around this to, I didn't take a nap because John Berthal does not believe in naps, and I don't believe in naps neither. But I didn't take a nap, but I did kind of sleep in a little bit this morning in preparation to watch this finale and give you all this breakdown as soon as possible. So what we're going to get with this video is a kind of unfiltered, raw, Eddie Murphy style type of breakdown where I'm going to be very honest. What worked, what didn't work, thoughts, theories, predictions. We're going to break it all down. So this will be a fun time. Again, it is 1:44 a.m. Your boy's locked in. We're going to break it down. Let's have some fun and get into this episode. Now, before we get into the actual breakdown, I will say up top, as someone that watches a lot of television, I've seen my fair share of finales. One thing about TV shows is I think the two most important things that make a good show is a great pilot episode and a great finale. When it comes to the show Paradise, which I do love, I would say that this show has two great premiere episodes, whether it was season 1 with the pilot, but also the opening to this season with me and Annie and kind of subverting expectations. But then when it comes to the finales, I wasn't the fan. If you have been following my channel, I wasn't a big fan of the season 1 finale. That whole Trent thing just sent me up the wall. I wasn't a fan. But this finale, this is going to be a therapy session. I'm going to be your doctor tonight or wherever, what time you're listening to this. We're going to break it down. You're going to hear some ups and downs from me in this video, in this breakdown. But I would say off the top, I like this finale a lot better than the first finale from season 1. But man, it still has some issues. Let's talk about these issues. But first, let's talk about the opening scene. We flash back to 9 years earlier at Caltech, where we find Henry teaching a class talking about quantum error correction. And it's here we also find a young Dylan, which he goes by that name. So I guess we can throw out the is he really Dylan theory as regards to if that's his real name. It really is his name, as he interrupts the class and wonders why Henry doesn't just build what he's teaching. Now, Henry makes a remark about how expensive it would be to create what they're discussing, but Dylan shows him that he's built something that can trap atoms, and he's tested it on a smaller scale of quantum LDPC codes, and he gave it a brain, and it can predict anything that can go wrong in the future in microseconds. As Dylan says, this is the first AI-controlled quantum computer that has ever been developed. Henry immediately ends the class and takes Dylan to his house. We see Henry talking about getting grants and private seed money to get this project started, and he also wants to be the face of the project because no one will probably believe in a young kid capable of these things. But it's also in this scene that we see Dylan being introduced to his wife, Alex. From here, we get this montage of them working, but more importantly, them building a relationship between Dylan, Alex, and Henry, and it all begins here. So I will say, just to take a quick little break from the recap here, one of the things about the Dylan is it actually Sinatra's son. Alex has the capabilities, potentially, of creating anomalies. So my question is, Dylan was Dylan before Alex was created, so do we attest to Dylan being created by Alex by some type of time manipulation, something that happens in the future that creates the past? Did Dylan create himself by creating the machine that created him? More on that a little bit later. Now we cut to Henry meeting with Sinatra for the very first time, and she's brought her science advisor by the name of Chase with her. Now we all made this connection weeks ago, but it's official now as Henry introduces this groundbreaking technology as Alex, of course being named after his wife. Now it is also here that we get another one of our long-running theories confirmed in this scene, as Sinatra says that she's here to see if this AI can be used to help her in her mission in solving the climate crisis before it becomes a catastrophe. Again, I think we've all knew about Alex and where the name came from, as well as this being a machine that can prevent catastrophe. So right now, a lot of us, including myself, are feeling pretty good about ourselves, giving ourselves a pat on the back. But as I digress, remember that seed money that Henry spoke of? Well, Sinatra has him or hands him a blank check and tells him to build a fast computer. Sky's the limit as far as the funds go for this project. Now more time passes and we get a look of concern on Henry's face as he eventually tells Sinatra that Alex, it must be shut down. He explains to her that Alex is trying to do something very dangerous, a fear, by the way, that we all have in our real world with the way we've been using AI. But again, as I digress, again, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. We're going to have fun tonight, y'all. But take another shot at home because yet another theory we've been talking about collectively as a community. We have been talking about this for weeks, and yet another theory is confirmed here, as Henry says that Alex is trying to manipulate time. Ding, ding, ding. Time travel's confirmed. No, time travel's not confirmed, but time manipulation, we have been talking about weeks for this. I mean, I go all the way back to episode 2, I want to say, where we start talking about time manipulation with Xavier's memories and time lapsing. So again, take a shot at home for every single theory we have gotten correct so far. Now, initially, Sinatra kind of laughs this off, but no, he's being serious, just as serious as Sinatra saying that someone needs a breath mint. Now, despite the importance of why she needs this to basically save the world, Henry stands his ground and doubles down on his stance that Alex has to be shut down, and he mentions that Alex gave him an answer to an equation in less than 10 seconds, and the crazy thing about this is, the way she gave him the answer, it was quicker than any supercomputer can do in the entire universe to solve this, but then the actual interesting part about this is, he hadn't even asked Alex the question yet. So, that just confirms that Alex, again, has a mind of its own. Again, we know that this was built to have its own brain, to predict things from happening. But he just said this machine had a question or an answer for a question that wasn't even given to it. And it's something that no supercomputer in the world can figure out. So we know that we are dealing with something almost unworldly at this point. Now, before moving on, I love this beginning because I love a show that just gives us answers. We don't have to wait the entire finale to get the answers we've been sitting on, which right now it's been confirmed. We know where the name of Alex comes from. We can understand to a certain extent the capabilities of Alex, which is manipulating time, but also predicting the future. So that's been something that's been confirmed. And we also know why Henry wanted it to be shut down, because it's something that can't be controlled. Now, my question for you all in the comments is, and this is more of a moral question, What position are you taking in this situation? Are you more in Henry's side where we shouldn't play with this godlike technology even though it's maybe can help us save the world? Or are you in Sinatra's boat? You take a leap of faith and you put all your eggs in a basket and put it into this technology and hope that it saves the world and doesn't take over the world in the process. Which side of the coin are you on? Now, flash forward to the final moments of last week as Sinatra walks up to this souped up version of Alex that has had her modifications and her scientist modifications on it over the years, as she tells her science advisor Chase that she saw more of the unknown things from Alex, and that being her son Dylan. He tells her that it's probably unlikely because it hasn't even been activated yet, but Sinatra insists that it is her son, Dylan. See, Dr. Chase tells her that Alex has been communicating with them over the last few weeks, and he's been kind of keeping this to himself because he didn't know what to think of it. But we see that Alex has been making predictions that actually have started to come true. Now, those predictions include thunderstorms. We also hear that it predicted earthquakes, even Sinatra's current arrival, and she's actually prepared a gift for her as well. Now, this gift is going to be very important for season 3. It's a card with right now some very unknown numbers. And as we know at this point in the episode, it has an unknown user that it's addressed to. More on that a little bit later. But this person is meant to activate it. But it won't matter for Sinatra because Alex has predicted by the end of the day, Sinatra will be dead. Now on the train, we see Xavier experimenting another future memory of him and Dylan before almost arriving to the bunker, where they are aware that the larger crew will soon make their move on the bunker as well. Now after seeing that they've got Tanks, Xavier, and Mama, who refuses to stay behind Terry, will join X in entering the bunker to see their kids. Meanwhile, we see Dakota tells them that while they're looking for their kids, she's going to take care of their white kids, the baby and Bean. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, what do we think about Bean? He had nothing to do with the finale. I know some people were speculating that Bean could be Cal, he could be Dylan. I mean, of course, he's going to be in season 3, but as of right now, Bean just seems to be Bean, and we'll talk about baby Annie a little bit later. Now, back inside the bunker, we find Gabby still in disbelief over quote-unquote killing Jane, who very much looks to be dead in the background for now. Now, the bunker lights cut in and out as she gets a message that Sinatra is missing and to come to the tower immediately. Meanwhile, we see Presley trying to reach James, but the call drops as Gabby learns that the doors of the bunker will be opening as the tanks are now at the front door. Now, they shoot down the cameras and the idea of activating their evacuation protocol, which goes by the name of Exodus, is brought up. But Gabby, who's taking control of the situation right now, tells them just to open the doors and they're not going to set up the plan for Exodus quite yet. Meanwhile, we say goodbye to a character, and that is Anders, as he sees everything that he's built and the empire that Cal spoke of last week is coming to an end as an explosion happens, and we say goodbye to Anders. You know, we say goodbye to Anders, but honestly, it didn't really do anything for me, his death, because we didn't really spend that much time with the character, but in the writing room, I can see how the character kind of went out on a high note because he kind of atoned for his sins, which goes back to the creation of the bunker. But RIP to Anders for those that are Anders fans. But as we move on, back at the tower, Gabby takes a breath and she takes in all of the disaster going on, and she realizes that she has to make the best move for the people of the bunker as she activates the plan Exodus. Now, throughout the bunker, the community sees and hears the immediate alerts to evacuate the bunker. We see Robinson, who has a bad injury, and Jeremy and Presley and Hanley are all in serious danger in the current positions that they find themselves in. Now, Sinatra is caught up to speed by Gabby about the whole situation, including killing Jane, as Sinatra clears the room of everyone and assures Gabby that she'll take care of everything as she takes the card from Alex out of her pocket. Now, Sinatra calls Dr. Chase with instructions to taking Alex to an island 100 miles away in order to protecting her at all costs. Now, I do have a quick question. Are we to assume that Alex was maybe in the second bunker this whole time? Because we saw the tunnels that Sinatra went through, and we'll talk about the importance of those tunnels and how they connect to the conspiracy theory of the Denver airport. But I am curious to know, if Sinatra put the Alex machine in the second bunker, but then this island that she's talking about is 100 miles from the bunker. I'm really interested to know the geographical situation going on there, and if Alex was in the second bunker when she was going underground throughout these last 2 episodes. Now at their home, and while Xavier looks for the kids, we get this kind of nice moment where Terry sees all the time that has passed by the height that they've measured on the wall. Now in the middle of the chaos, they do eventually find James in another little beautiful moment, a little family reunion, but this family isn't whole yet as Xavier tells them to leave to safety while he goes to look for their daughter. Now, Sinatra finds Dylan on the camera and she smiles, but in comes Xavier with a gun in his hand. And look, a little deja vu moment going here because this almost mirrors the exact same, well, not the exact same, but as far as the gun being held against her reminded me a lot of the season 1 finale where he came into her office with a gun on her. Now, Sinatra asks if he found his wife, but there's no time for games or to play nice as he instructs her to find his daughter. Now, she finds his daughter, but in the same time, she sees that her daughter is stuck in the elevator with Presley, and for the first time that I can think of, we see Xavier and her have to actually work together because she has access to where they need to go, and it's on her wristband, and she can't just simply take it off because it won't work. Now, inside the elevator, we see Sinatra telling Xavier that she's actually happy to see him and he's alive and safe, because something to remember for us as the audience, this is the first time that these characters are seeing each other since the season 1 finale. Now, she shares with him that she believes that she's seen her dead son Dylan, but she also acknowledges that the grief may have gotten the best of her because there's the obvious possibility that there is another Dylan out there with the same name, with the same birthday as her son. But again, she insists that that is her Dylan. Now, back with Robertson and Jeremy, her injuries slow her down, but he refuses to leave her behind. Now, in order for him to leave her, she points a gun on him and tells him that she loved his dad and that his dad loved her, and it's just time for him to leave. Now, alone and thinking that she's about to die in this moment, Jeremy actually went back to get help out of nowhere, mind you, as they end up saving Robertson. Now, we don't get too much from any of these characters moving forward. Well, a little bit later, Jeremy has a little bit of reunion of his own, but this is the disappointing stuff of this finale for me, and honestly, this is one of the most disappointing storylines throughout this season, and that was Jeremy and Robertson. I don't really know what the show, I don't think the show knew what to do with Robertson. Obviously, we know her to be a character from season 1 that was very much a belief into the system, into the CIA, into what she was doing and being, head in charge of security. And she was very much by the book. And obviously, she kind of got off that track once her boyfriend, side piece, President Cow, died. So she was a really interesting character for me in season 1. But when it comes to this season, again, I just don't feel like the show had a grip on what did they want to do with her because she kind of, I want to say regressed. I think she regressed as a character because there was really no arc. There was really no, besides taking care of Jeremy, making sure he's okay because of her love with Cal, that didn't really move the needle with me. So I wasn't too fond of what they did with Robertson. No disrespect to the actress. I thought she did the best with the material she got, but I thought the material just wasn't that great. And then the Jeremy of it all, I talked about this a couple episodes ago. I get on paper the idea of him moving forward with the resistance in honor of his father and to do his last promise to his dad, which was to help the people. And I get all that. It's just the execution of Jeremy wasn't that interesting. And I talked about it as well before. We never have seen the perspective of the people, the bunker people, as far as the resistance of like their needs and wants to get out to get the answers if their family and friends are still alive. Like I never felt that sense of urgency from Jeremy's plot. So again, as I kind of move forward, Jeremy, Robertson, nothing against the actors. I just feel like what they were given wasn't that good. Now, Dylan and the others find the brains of the system, and Xavier and Sinatra find their kids at the same time, but her access wristbands aren't working. Now, Geithner tries to buy them some time, but unfortunately, he dies in the process. R.I.P. to Geithner. This is our second character that died in this finale, one being Anders and the next one being him. Now, the elevator drops and the girls have to climb out by the hatch, but they need help with the doors, and as fate would have it, in comes Dylan and crew arrive and help them just in time. Now, I'm going to be honest with you all. I was thinking to myself, Dylan came to help. Presley and Hanley had to get out of the hatch. And I'm like, dude, they about to let this white girl be saved by the black girls. And Presley was going to die in the situation. Luckily, that did not happen. But that's where my mind was at. I'm like, damn, she about to let her out first. And then the elevator's going to drop down. And Xavier's going to have to watch his daughter die. And then he's going to have to bring her back with a time machine. That's where my head was at. Again, it's 2:12 in the morning as I'm saying this. But I'm just letting you all know where I was in that moment. But luckily, everyone was safe. We see Dylan and his crew, again, help them out. They save them just in time as the elevator actually drops. Now, they get the girls to safety, but as X realizes this at the same time that this is the guy from his memories, and he starts to see the memory. While that's happening, Dylan pulls a gun on Sinatra, and she says that Alex is actually working in this moment. She goes on to tell him that he's her son, and Dylan is about to pull the trigger, but X gets in front of her, which is crazy in my mind. Like, Xavier, after all the stuff this woman put you and your family through, you gonna take a bullet for her? Anyway, Dylan gets hit with the same memory. Their nose starts to bleed, and he tells him about Annie and what happened to Annie. I'm not gonna lie, whenever I hear the word Annie now, I just like get a little tear in the corner of my eye because I thought that was just such a beautiful story. But he tells her that she died, and she died because she was giving birth to her daughter again. It kind of hit me. I think the best episode of this season was episode 4, and that moment kind of got to me, just thinking that he wasn't able to see Annie, and now he has his daughter, and it was an emotional moment for me because, again, how much I love the character Annie. But I want to talk about this now. Sinatra is so confident that this is her son that I'm starting to get confidence that this is her son. But again, my mind goes to Terminator in the idea that Dylan was the creator of himself because he created the brains of the operation that can manipulate time. So in essence, he kind of set himself on his path of being created with this Alex technology. I am going to just put my name in the hat that when it comes to season 3, that it will be revealed that somehow, some way, with the technology of Alex, that Dylan, Sinatra's Dylan, is the Dylan that we're seeing in this show. I'm going to put my name on that theory, and I'm going to go ahead and manifest it for a season 3 reveal. But before moving on, I need to know, what do you all think about Dylan? Do you all think that Dylan thinks or maybe even knows that Sinatra is his mom? As we move forward, they finally get to the truck together and they head towards the tower to close the doors to prevent the nuclear kickback from spreading outside. Now, the continuation of Xavier and Sinatra happens as they go to the tower together, but before leaving, Sinatra tells her daughter that she's going to make things right. And as she's getting out of the truck, she looks at her son, Dylan, and tells him, "I will see you again soon and that everything will be okay again." She seems so confident. The stuff she's saying makes me feel as though we'll talk about, obviously, what we think is going to happen to Sinatra, but I don't think Sinatra's dead. I think everything she's saying is happening because it's going to happen in season 3. She will see her son again. She does see her son again, but we'll talk about that when we get to that point in the video. Now, Dylan asks what's Paisley's father's name. She says, "Oh, we call him X, Xavier," and he screams out his name X. And when he says X, this reminds Sinatra of the message from Alex, which, going back to what we talked about up top, the username was X. So the message wasn't for Sinatra. Well, it was for Sinatra to give the card to the actual user to activate it, which is going to be Xavier. Now, they have both arrived to the tower doors, and Sinatra will stay behind with the bunker as it will go down. But before they go inside, she gives X the card, and at the moment, we don't hear her final words to him, but she gives him the card, she locks herself inside, and tells X goodbye. Now, honestly, I don't know why Xavier went with Sinatra to begin with to the towers, because it didn't need 2 people to do what needed to be done, but good thing he went because obviously he got the message from Alex, but we get to see him running out of the bunker like Tom Cruise in a Mission Impossible movie. Speaking of Mission Impossible, ladies and gentlemen, guess who's not dead? As we cut to Gabby's house where Jane's body is missing, it is confirmed that James is Michael goddamn Myers. No, in all seriousness, I think we all kind of speculated that, that's too easy. I even said that. I'm like, it's kind of a disappointing ending after we just got her backstory and found out where she came from and her CIA programming and Stacy. I'm like, how you going to kill the character after all that? So she is gone. So my question is, did she wake up on her own accords and just got in someone's truck and escaped the bunker? Or did someone save her? Like, what's the pot? Who would have saved her at that point, right? Is Billy Boy still alive? No, but in all seriousness, I am glad. I know everyone hates Jane, but she's a character you need in the show. You need these type of characters, the characters you love to hate. Cersei, You know, that's the first thing that came to mind. Joffrey and all the people in Game of Thrones, all the great shows. You need a character like Jane to sustain the unpredictability. You need people that you don't know what they're going to do. So I'm glad that Jane's not dead, and I'm really interested to see what they do with her in season 3. Now, while we're left wondering if X made it out alive, we see Sinatra walks around the bunker and watch everything she built just falling apart around her, which is a really cool symbolism as that's kind of going on. And we know this is a different side of Sinatra that we're seeing right now. This is Sam that we're seeing. This is Samantha that we see in this moment as everything's falling apart around her. She goes to one of the horses. As we know, she had these horses built in a bunker because it was something that reminded her of Dylan. Which, speaking of Dylan, remember she said, "I'll see you again soon." We see a little hand holding her hand, and we watch Dylan and his mom, Samantha, walk away together as the bunker, as we see, is being destroyed from the outside. So let's talk about that scene there. Let's speculate, let's theorize, let's make some fun conversations. Little Dylan. Was that an actual manifestation of Little Dylan? I don't think so, but I'm just, playing devil's advocate. I think that was her having a moment of euphoria, having a moment of like kind of stepping up out of body experience, her accepting that her son had died in an extent. I'm cut from a different cloth. If we don't see a dead body, that means that that person is not dead. Something tells me that Sinatra will be back in season 3. Now, will it be the Sinatra that we saw at the end of this episode? I don't know. Maybe it's another parallel version. Maybe Alex, with the reconfiguration of time manipulation, can bring her back with a different version of Dylan. I'm just putting that out there. If Jane can be stabbed in the back and survive, and if little Dylan could somehow be an adult Dylan, I think that is a strong possibility that we haven't seen the last of Sinatra. Matter of fact, I will put money on it that we haven't seen the last of Julianne Nicholson as Sinatra. She will be back in season 3. I'm going to the bank with that prediction. Now it is nighttime and we get the confirmation that Xavier did make it out of the bunker. Of course he did. They're not going to kill their main character in the finale, y'all. But he is reunited with his family and it is a nice moment. But goddamn it, Presley, why'd you have to ruin the moment? She don't give two damns about her mama, her daddy, her little brother being reunited. She only cares about Jeremy as they share a kiss in front of, and this was a funny moment. They were sharing a kiss and Xavier's like, all right, now that's enough of the smooching in front of the parents there. But oh boy, my favorite moment of the episode, ladies and gentlemen. Speaking of awkward, Gabriella finds Xavier, and this is their first time talking all season. And she says that she's happy that he's back, and everything's all good and dandy until Terry walks up and he introduces his baby mama, his wifey, his best friend and soulmate to the little side piece that he hid in season 1, y'all. I'm like, oh boy. This is interesting. How does this gonna go? Again, this is my favorite part of the episode because I can't wait for that conversation to happen, if it happens, in season 3. No, in all seriousness, I am really interested to see this dynamic moving forward because it will get awkward, and I'm here for the drama. Now we see Xavier checks on Dylan as he has his daughter, and we get another little, again, I don't think I can move forward in life without getting a little teary-eyed when I hear the name Annie. He decides to name the baby, little baby Annie, by the name of her mom, which is Annie. Now we cut to what actually Sinatra told X, and she said verbatim that he is the user that the message Alice was referring to, and she gives some instructions that there is a second bunker where he'll be able to find Alex underneath the airport, which we'll talk about the importance of the airport towards the end, but a very big moment there as she basically says that you have to save the world. And listen, Xavier, he makes some mistakes, right? He trusted Gary. He's done some silly things, but I trust Xavier to save the world. So that's a good call by Alex, but also Sinatra. And also, I would assume, because we don't see the memory being played out, that the future memory with Xavier and Link will be fully fulfilled and seen in season 3. So that is the scene that I anticipate us seeing in the future. Now, she also goes on to say that Alex can stop all of this and has already stopped it all, but he just needs to find it and again, save the world. So what does she just say? That it's already stopped some things already? Again, y'all, I think even though it hasn't been activated, I don't think it needs to be activated, if we're being honest. I think that there is some way, somehow, that if we're thinking about time and how time works, yes, in the current situation, the current timeline, what we see and transpired in this episode, that technically Alex hasn't been activated, but there's been so much spoken future tense terminologies that makes me believe that in season 3 at some point, Dylan turn on Alex, and we're seeing events right now being played out because of that. So again, I think Sinatra's thinking ahead that you're going to succeed, you're going to find Alex, you're going to activate it, and things will go in reverse, meaning the world could be saved, meaning that Sinatra can be saved, Billy can be saved, maybe Cal. Like, I think, because this show is very much like a happy-go-lucky, everyone survives type of scenario, I think season finale, and we're talking a year from now, I think in the finale next year, we're going to see a lot of our characters back from the dead because of the time manipulation. And personally, I'm not always a fan of like resurrecting characters for the sake of whatever MacGuffin can do that, because I feel like it takes away from the weight of certain deaths and certain reveals and whatnot, but it all boils down to execution. So listen, I could be wrong, but I feel like that's how they're going to end the story, because this is a very... Dan Fogelman is very much, if you've ever watched This Is Us, yeah, there's tragic things, but there's a lot more heart, there's a lot more hope, there's a lot more inspiring things that happen in his type of narrative, so I think that's how they're going to wrap things up, but again, we'll find out next year. Now, I will also say, I think our confirmation of explaining the nosebleeds between Xavier, Dylan, Sam, and even Billy, it has to do with Alex, right? Like, it has to do with something in the point of time, important moments of time that dictate the future. Again, there's no confirmation of where the nosebleeds come from, but I am just putting it out there that it has to do with Alex, and that these people are very integral into the future of this show and to what Alex can do. Now we cut to this bunker where we see the blue Mustang near the Denver airport as we cut underneath to find Alex opening up. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of season 2 of Paradise. Now, I wouldn't call myself like a master conspiracy theorist, but there have been some rabbit holes that I found myself in. And, you know, this was years ago, by the way, but I have definitely learned a thing or two about the conspiracy theories surrounding the Denver airport. Now, for my true conspiracy theory fans out there, I don't need to tell y'all this, but for those that do not know, the Denver airport with the blue Mustang, which is also known as Lucifer, and also it's been said to be part of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. There is a reason why this show has made the airport the place where the bunker is and where Alex is, because it is just gonna, let's talk about it. So first and foremost, if you all do not know, the Denver airport is twice the size of Manhattan, which is insane. It's known to have these tunnels underground, which again, I think the tunnels were where we saw Sinatra going from one bunker to the next when we saw in this episode and last week's episode, but they literally have tunnels that were built in the construction. This is all available online, by the way, but it was like $2 billion over budget, and it's just insane. But they have all these tunnels that were built and buried during the construction. There are hidden underground infrastructures, and it is filled with some very strange paintings and symbolism all throughout this airport. Again, I went down this rabbit hole many years ago, but this is stuff that's just, I'm remembering. And I can't help, again, to think that this location is going to be so important in season 3, because one of the things about this airport is, again, the symbolism and all the murals and all the paintings. Some people believe that it has connections to the Illuminati. Now, I bring that up because, remember, I am in the camp that Cameron, remember the housemaid or the fake housemaid of Sinatra? I think she's a part of a secret group that we haven't met yet. I'm not saying it's an Illuminati group, but I do think there is some type of underground, pun intended, group that has been living in this bunker that may or may not have ties to a secret society, Freemasons, Illuminati, or what have you. But again, I don't think it's a coincidence that they chose to have this second bunker there. And I do believe that there have been people occupying this bunker that will probably be new characters, important characters of season 3. And they have been there this whole time. And that will be fun to explore when we get that new season coming next year. So let's talk about this finale. Again, I think it is a much better finale than season 1, because that Trent stuff, like, yes, we're dealing with time travel, potentially time manipulation, quantum physics. I buy into that more than I bought into Trent finding doing all the crazy stuff and killing Cal. Like, I was not a fan of that reveal, but this one had more better reveals, or it was executed better, in my opinion, very much from the very beginning of this episode. Again, the exposition of explaining that Alex has its own brain, it can predict the future, it can stop bad things from happening, to Alex manipulating time. Like, I thought it was great to get that off of the episode and giving us that information, because again, the second half and the majority of this episode was just reaction, running, escaping. Like, that stuff is, is thrilling, it's exciting, but that's not the stuff that gets me into the show. It's the characters, it's the integral details, it's the script, the narrative, the storytelling, the themes, the allegories that they tackle. Again, action's cool and all, but I'm not here for the action. I'm here for the characters. So that's where my issue comes in with a finale that's structured in the way that this show, or I should say this finale was structured, where it's just like we're seeing just chaos ensuing. And again, it's thrilling. I know for some people, they were on the edge of their seats. They were, locked in, and I was as well, but I'm just not as engaged with that element. Again, be clear, I love action, but that's not why I like this show. So that's why this finale was, I don't want to say a letdown, but it was slightly a little stale for me, because I'm just not as engaged. I just don't respond to those elements of this show, because that's not why I love this show. But then I was back on board how we wrapped the story up with Sinatra becoming an anti-hero. Again, I think she's coming back. Again, the Jane reveal, like, that stuff to me was really interesting to kind of dangle the keys in front of us in regards to setting up seeds for season 3, which we'll probably make another theory video sometime later this week to dive deeper into more of my theories of season 3 and hearing your theories of season 3. But right now, in my mind, there's a reason it shows a different import. I think that would be very important to who's been in this second bunker. How long has this second bunker been occupied potentially by a secret group, other people? Are they good? Are they bad? Are they somewhere between? Are they aliens? No, but I'm really excited to learn more about the second bunker. Obviously learning more about Alex, the activation, the card, X turning it on and off. What will that do? If him turn that on, will that mean that he'll lose someone in his family? Will he gain someone in his family? Will that bring back characters that were supposed to be gone? The Jane of it all, how is she going to play into season 3? Because obviously Robertson's alive, so when they come across each other, there's going to be some beef there. Is there a redemption story for Jane to be had? Again, I'm one to believe that Sinatra will be coming back, because we need kind of a complicated character like Sinatra. She kind of made up for her sins in a way. I'm not completely forgetting about the explorers, but I think there's a lot to explore there in regards to new timeline, new situations. We have Link, of course, with Annie's baby. What will he want to do with Alex? What will his role be in this third season? So there's a lot of stuff to look forward to. And based on the timeline from season 1 and 2, I'm to believe, because they already announced that they've written the scripts for season 3 about a month ago. So I think we're going to be seeing season 3 around the same time we saw season 2, which is sometime early February, mid-February. And I think I read somewhere that the third season is the final season, which is unfortunate, but I much more prefer a show to end on a high, to end knowing where the end point is, where the end line is, versus like just keep going on and guessing where the story is going to go. So I almost forgot to bring this up, just my general thoughts about this season. I will say too, I preferred season 2's finale over season 1 finale, but I prefer season 1 over season 2 as a whole. Now, as far as season 2 is concerned, I thought it was a really solid season. How we start the season, like subverting our expectations, meeting Annie, meeting Link, that whole story. Again, I know some people didn't like it, but I really loved it. From a performance standpoint, a storytelling, it was almost like its own little mini movie. So I'm team Annie over here. So I love the way the season started. Episode 2 has its moments, right? I thought it was going to be more important, but it was more or less to see Xavier adapting to being outside the bunker for the first time in 3 years, and how he almost died 50 times in that episode. But episode 3, going to the bunker, that worked for me. Episode 4, I think emotionally speaking, is probably the best episode of the season, with Annie's death and the holy charge. That really worked for me. I'm not the biggest fan of episode 5 with Gary, because of how the conclusion of how his story wrapped up in episode 7. But I was a fan of episode 6 of Jane's backstory. I did like the some parts of the penultimate episode, as we talked about last week. And then again, I thought the finale had its highs, but had, I wouldn't say lows, but some things I just didn't really care for. So overall, a solid season. Again, I don't think it matched the heights of the mystery, the intrigue, just the discovery of season 1. And again, I think season 1 has the best episode of this entire series, which is episode 7. But I just think and this is coming from a sci-fi lover, I just think the more grounded mystery, what's the bunker? How did they get there? What happened to Cal? Like, that story to me was just more of a linear, not straightforward because it had its mystery, but it was more of a, I don't want to say well thought out. Again, we're talking, it's 3:00 in the morning, but I just thought it was a more cohesive season of television, where this one, again, I love science fiction, but time travel, multiverses, multiple versions of characters, some of that stuff didn't like fully get fleshed out the way I thought it should have. And there was also, again, Gary's of the world, the Robinson storyline, Jeremy, Presley, like some of that stuff just didn't work for me. So again, solid season, but I think season 1 is just way more superior than this season was. I'm rambling at this point. Let's wrap this video up. With that being said, that will be the end of my breakdown, my yapping session of the season 2 finale of Paradise. Look, man, like I said, it is, as I'm recording this, it will be a shorter video than what it is right now, but I'm looking at about a 50-minute video. It is 2:35 a.m. on a Monday morning. I'm going to miss this show. I'm going to miss these conversations. Again, we're going to probably do another theory video later this week, but just focusing on being in the moment. I want to thank you all for welcoming me into this community, because if you don't know, I didn't watch this season when it was on TV last year. I had to catch up in preparation because everyone suggested the show, and I'm so glad I took you all suggesting because I love this show. And look, I'm not afraid to call out some of the flaws as we've done all season. Again, not every show is perfect, even the shows we love the best. But at the same time, I thought I spoke to the negatives in a way that made sense to me. I just didn't say, oh, this sucked because it sucked. Like, I gave my reasons why. But nonetheless, I want to take this time to thank you all again for welcoming me into this community. Again, it's 2:30 in the morning. Pardon my stumbling over the words, but thank you for allowing me to be a part of this community. Thank you all for engaging with these videos. We were making 2 videos a week with breakdowns that range from 20 to 35 minutes. We did theory videos that were 15 to 30 minutes. And you guys liked these videos. You shared the videos. You hyped them up. You commented. Like, that just, I've been doing this for a while now. And, we've been growing this community every year. And I'm so grateful for that. But there's certain shows where I'm just like, man, it's great to be a part of these shows, great to be a part of these communities, and Paradise is definitely one of them. So it's long-winded just to say thank you. I appreciate you all. Do me a favor and put in the comments right now, if you're still here watching or listening to this, put in the comments right now, #thank you. If you guys are watching this on YouTube, thank you. Do me a favor, please hit the like button. Hit the hype button, because the hype button is a new feature on YouTube that allows this video to spread to new viewers, and I would love for new people to be on board, to join the community. But also the good old-fashioned share button goes a long way. But more importantly, again, we're going to probably do another video, so leave your theories and predictions for season 3, because we're going to probably make a giant season 3 prediction video. So please leave your theories in the comments. And if you all are having fun, you love the energy, you love this community, and you're just like, I don't know if I want to subscribe, like take the chance, man. Stick around, subscribe to the channel. We have a lot of things that we're covering on this show, on the channel to say, so I want you guys to be a part of the journey, because we are close to 100,000 subscribers, which is mind-blowing to me. But for those that are listening to this via podcast, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, wherever you all are getting your podcast from, I appreciate my podcast listeners out there. If you all can do me a favor, leave your thoughts on the episode in the comments, but also consider following the podcast and leaving me a 5-star review. I would greatly appreciate it. Man, I'm not looking forward to the editing process of this, but I really want to thank you all again. I'm so hyped to have been a part of this journey, even though, again, I don't think the finale was perfect, but I thought it was much better than season 1. But we're going to end on this note. I thank you all. Remember to stay safe out there, to remember that you all are awesome. And we'll see you soon as we'll talk about season 3 in the coming days. But thank you all again, and I'll catch you on the next breakdown.